Councillors, it's 5:30. I'm going to open the meeting. Welcome all back to our 2021 schedule. Welcome to the members of the public that are zooming in this evening. During the current COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the newly legislated state government requirements, the February 2021 Ordinary Council meeting will be closed to the members of the public and will be available for viewing via Zoom webinar facilities. A link to the council meeting will be available via the council website. Recordings of council meetings or parts thereof cannot be copied, recorded, reproduced, reused or transmitted without the prior consent of the General Manager. The meeting is being recorded and made publicly available on council's website, and the persons attending the meeting should refrain from making any defamatory statements. Council acknowledges that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Wiradjuri, Gundungurra and Darug people and respects the history and culture of the elders both past and present. Could I now call on Councillor Gibbons to offer the prayer, please?
Ask our Lord tonight to be the best we can be. We walk this way but once, our Lord. Please bless us tonight as we serve our community the best we can with our decision making. Thank you for the freedom we enjoy in this great land and the lifestyle so many of the world's people cannot have because of persecution, starvation and dictatorship. And thank you, Lord, for the abundant summer and the beauty of this place we call home. We pray for peace and contentment among ourselves and this community as we serve tonight this meeting in our community. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Councillor Gibbons. We have one apology this evening, councillors. Councillor Donny is applying for a leave of absence. Could I have someone to nominate that it be accepted, please? Councillor McGibbon and Councillor Gibbons. All in favour? Carried, thank you. Any declarations of interest this evening, councillors? None, thank you. Councillors, we have one presentation this evening. We're here to welcome John O'Malley from Intentus, who will present us a summary of the 2019-20 audited financial statements. Welcome, John. The floor is yours.
The presentation is very relaxed in format, so if you have questions about something I'm talking about, please feel free to interrupt at that time. I'm a partner in the audit firm Intentus. I'm based in Orange, and I've been doing local government audit for about 25 years. We act as contract audit agents to the Auditor General's office, so they actually sign your opinion and are your auditor, but we do the legwork for them on their behalf. So that's the background to how we work with the audit office. They also play a leading role in terms of setting priorities and particular areas of emphasis. So I'll start the presentation just looking at some of what the audit office is doing, because aside from financial statement audits, they also do special what's known as performance audits on particular areas. So cladding of buildings or operation of water facilities, credit card management, things like that might be areas where they might dive in and look at a handful of councils and make some findings and recommendations to the industry. I'll then focus on Oberon's 2020 financial statements, look at what the operating result was and what was behind it, and then just look at some of the ratios in the financial statements that are used to compare councils a lot. And I often find with the ratios that it takes a little bit of perspective to make sense of them. And if you look at them in isolation, you could actually draw quite erroneous conclusions. So having some perspective makes a difference in looking at those. So that's where we're going to cover. Shouldn't be any more than about 10 or 15 minutes, but as I say, if there's questions, fire away. If I can't answer them, I'm happy to take my notes. So areas that the audit office are focusing on in the current year, and which will appear in the report to Parliament, which they issued in March this year, are on fairly typical areas. They've covered things like asset valuations and cybersecurity for quite a while. fraud controls, IT. There's been a focus on that, and it's not going away. And with attacks that have been taking place, notably on New South Wales Transport or on ANU, I think the reason that that's not going away is quite clear. And so an emphasis on improving cybersecurity protocols and practices is going to remain. A couple of others that they're looking at are things like procurement, shared services and collaboration. And I suppose some of the learnings from the amalgamated councils around that could be enlightening too. They're also going to do performance audits, which we should see reports on this year around credit card management, developer contributions and voluntary planning agreements, and procurement. So those are the areas they're going. The other one that which will be of interest, I guess, which we've seen the preliminary findings on, was to do with the management by the DPIE of water in regional areas. And I think the finding of that one was largely that there hasn't been any management from DPIE for at least 6 years. So they certainly don't pull their punches when they report. In terms of Oberon, there were a couple of things which were significant in this year's audit. There were several things. I mean, I think the obvious one is, of course, the pandemic, and you're all well aware of how that affected council. But aside from that, it was a fairly big year. It was the first year that I had to take the role as the partner on the Oberon audit. So I don't come, although I've got a lot of experience in local government audits, and particularly in the central west of the state, I didn't have any background in Oberon's particular circumstances. So there was a bit of coming up to speed there. We had a couple of new accounting standards, and normally that isn't terribly notable, but there were ones which have a big impact. And the first of those was to do with how we recognise our income. In the past, it used to be that when you receive the money, or the right to receive money associated with a grant, then you recognise the income. And that gave us some problems, because people were of the view, well, hang on, I get the money this year and then I spend it next year. And so I'm looking fabulous this year in terms of my result, and dreadful next year. There's no matching. So the change in the accounting standards actually sort of came back more to the matching principle, where when you receive some money, if it has obligations attached, you recognise the liability for those obligations until you've satisfied them. And at that point, you recognise the revenue. So timing of income recognition changed with these standards, and that was quite substantial. The other one didn't impact Oberon. We did the exercise with the council's finance team to see whether it would have an impact, and it was to do with leasing. And background to that one, there's a gentleman by the name of Sir David Tweedy, who's an Englishman who sits on the International Accounting Standards Board. And he was on a jet one day, and obviously fairly bored, because it struck him that he'd never flown in a jet that sat on the balance sheet of the airline he was flying with. And that seemed ridiculous. So we saw this international standard develop, where leased assets, because most airlines lease their fleet and they don't own it, leased assets were coming onto the balance sheet. And so what it meant was that if you had buildings or heavy equipment or things that you were leasing, where in the past you would have only shown a rent expense that you paid for them, now you brought to account what was known as a right of use asset and a corresponding liability for the lease payments that you would have to make. So it brought them onto the balance sheet. So while it might have a big effect for airlines who were busy being affected by other more pressing matters at the time, it also impacts, because all councils have to apply the same international accounting standards, it also impacts on councils. So in Oberon's case, we did the exercise to establish whether or not there were leases that needed to be recognised in that fashion, and there weren't. But nonetheless, it's quite involved, because for things like, say, garbage collection, if there's a truck dedicated to the use of just Oberon Shire Council's garbage collection, then there's an implicit lease, even though you're not owning the truck or controlling the truck. So there's a lot of work to do to establish that. So those couple of accounting standards were quite a bit of work. The other thing that was big was that, as you're probably aware, councils have to value their infrastructure assets. And last year was the year in which the roads, bridges, footpaths and stormwater drainage all have to be recognised, which is by far the biggest asset category, both in value and in complexity of the valuation exercise. So that was done. The outcome of that was that there was a net decrease in the carrying value of just over 26 million. And the reason for that decrease was that the unit rates, which had previously been used for valuing the pavement of unsealed roads, were found to be substantially higher. and the adjustment to those unit rates resulted in a reduction in the overall value of the infrastructure. So that was the net outcome. Turning then to the operating result of the council for the year, we look at it in two ways. We look at it, the underlying operating result, and we look at the operating result before capital grants and contributions. And the reason that we do that is that because the capital funding can vary quite considerably from year to year and can be big in amount when it is received, it can distort the results quite a bit. Whereas the operating result before capital amounts tends to be more stable in its outcome. So the results that we saw were that before capital funding, we had a deficit of 317,000, which was pretty much a break-even result. And after a capital funding, we had a surplus of 1.3 million. Looking at the income side of what drove that, rates income, as you can, through lived experience, you'd be aware, doesn't increase significantly from year to year in the absence of a special rate variation through IPAR. So modest growth there, just a $220,000 increase in our rates income to 4.5 million. Operating grants and contributions were down a little on the previous year, down a lot on the year prior when RAS recovery funding dropped away. Capital grants and contributions were also down a bit on the prior year, down by about 1.1 million on the previous year. The big one affecting the 2020 year, and which in conversation with Lynette before the meeting, she was saying has turned the corner in 2021, was to do with the RMS roadworks that council's been doing. So when we, as a council, do work on state roads, we get paid for it, and particularly if we use the council workforce to do it, we have the opportunity to make some margin on that, and that has a big impact on the result. And you can see that the tapering off in the 2020 year of that RMS money was significant, and that was a big driver of that drop in the result. Annual charges, so things like access charges to water and garbage collection and sewer services, much like rates, don't increase significantly, so only a $40,000 increase from 1.46 million to 1.5 million. Interest revenue is falling away as the return on council's investments is sort of being repriced at each time we renew an investment. And with the Reserve Bank at their February meeting indicating that we're not likely to see any upward movement for about 3 years, I suppose we're not going to likely to see much movement in that interest revenue. And other income is a little more variable. It contains things like the proceeds, profits on sale of items of plant equipment and the like. On the other side of the equation, the expenses, kicking off with the employee costs, they were up a little, partly through an increase. The employee costs, as they're reported in the council's financial statements, aren't simply the wages. That includes things like workers' compensation, insurance, uniforms, training, superannuation, and the like. So it's an amalgam, and it's also affected by the nature of the work that council's doing. So if council's workforce is constructing assets, those wages get capitalised into the value of the asset and don't appear as an expense. And if you're doing maintenance, it's an expense, and that's how the wages are reported. So last year was a year in which there was more of an emphasis on maintenance, and so that was the other thing which is impacted there in the reported employee costs. That also pans out in the materials. So you can see the materials expenses were a little bit higher last year than the previous year. Again, that was due to the focus last year being on maintenance work. If we'd been doing capital work, again, those costs would go into the value of the asset and not into the expense. Depreciation, finally, has pretty much maxed out. We've seen a depreciation expense of 3.95 million, up from 3.92 the previous year. But as a result of that valuation of the biggest infrastructure class having been done and actually resulting in a small decrease, we shouldn't see further increases in depreciation next year. So we've probably reached something of a plateau in that regard on depreciation expense. Borrowing costs reflect the fact that there was no change in no new borrowings taken out, and that the interest cost on the existing borrowings is what we're seeing there. And then other expenses were up a little bit. There were things like the outsourcing of the running of the pool to the YMCA resulted in some payments there. There were some other costs like RFS levy, which went up, and some insurances which also went up, which have driven other expenses up from where they were in the previous year. So total expenses came in just over 18 million, up from 17 million the previous year. Looking at council's level of cash and investments, you can see it's broken down into three different bars for each year. And the first of those is the bright red bar, which is your externally restricted money. So that money is things like water or sewer money or grant funds that have been received and unexpended. And so council has that money and will see the benefit of that money, but can't apply it to different purposes. It can only be used for those externally restricted purposes. The next two areas of the money which council has discretion over, and it's either applied internal restrictions where through your operational plan and through your budgeting process, you've set aside money in reserves for particular purposes that might be for capital works, plant replacement, employee leave entitlements or the like. And for those purposes, you've said we want this amount of money put to that purpose. And so you can change that, but it just needs to go back through, through council by resolution. And you also have unrestricted money, which represents money which is there as a buffer because, as has been made apparent with Central Coast Council, if you use too much of your unrestricted money and then start eating into your internal restrictions and then touch on your external restrictions, financially you end up in a real mess. So having some buffer and seeing, in fact, there was quite a bit more buffer there last year than there has previously been, is I think, a healthy sign. We'll probably see in the current year's financial statements that you won't see that distinction between unrestricted and internally restricted cash so much. There's a bit of debate going on at the moment about whether or not it'll be recorded that way, but whichever way it's reported, it represents money which council has discretion over. So the overall position is looking quite well balanced in Oberon's case, because certainly last year with only 82,000 in unrestricted cash, you were fairly hard up against the margin. Looking at the first of the ratios, and it's the unrestricted current ratio. And what an ordinary current ratio is saying, okay, for every dollar of liability we've got to pay in the next 12 months, how many dollars of short-term asset do we have to meet it with? And again, this one goes one step further. It says unrestricted. So it's saying, and all those externally restricted assets that we have, take them aside and the corresponding liabilities, so that we're just looking at things that we have more control over. The benchmarks there set at 1.5, so the Office of Local Government measure is that you should have $1.50 of short-term asset to meet $1 of liability. The outcome we saw here was $4.53. So certainly well above the benchmark, as you have been for the past 5 years, and indicating that council is comfortably able to pay its debts as and when they fall due. The next is not a ratio, but it's just a measure of your overall external debt in the form of long-term borrowings. The total borrowings at the end of the year stood at just over 2.8 million, down from nearly 3.3 the previous year. There were no new loans taken out in the 2020 year, nor in the 2019 year. There were repayments of 484,000, and that's the principal portion, not the total repayment. So as you pay down the loans, that principal repayment amount will increase. And barring further borrowing, it would see council in a debt-free position in perhaps 6 years. But I think with a low interest rate environment, it's perhaps a time too when debt isn't so scary. The next measure that we look at is actually the debt service cover ratio, which is a measure of how comfortably council can pay its debts. And what it does is it looks at the total repayments that you have to make, principal and interest, and it looks at out of your operating income, how many times over can you meet that. So the higher the ratio, the more comfortable you are. You can see that when council borrowed 3.4 million in the 2018 year, that the level of comfort dropped. But the benchmark there is set at 2%. Council's coming in at pretty much 6%. So again, indicating we're not excessively burdened with debt. This one I do put some store in. This ratio is looking at how effectively councils managed its debt collection. So the way it works is it says, okay, well, we started the year and some people hadn't paid their rates or their annual charges and interest, and they had to pay that to us. And then we levied the current year's rates, and so that had to be paid as well. So that gave us the total pool of money that could be collected. How much of that had not been collected at the end of the year is what this is saying. And the outcome there is at 10.12%. It's consistent with the prior year, and I understand there was a change in collection agents during that year that took a bit of bedding down to get things happening. But you can see it's come from better, because although the 10% is on the performance benchmark set by the LG, certainly what I'm seeing in central western New South Wales is councils are nearer to that 7 and 8% that historically Oberon had been at. And so I would suggest that's one where there's room for some improvement to be made in recovery there. It's not dreadful. It's certainly still on the bounds of the benchmarks, but you know, in spite of the COVID and other things, it can be bettered. I've turned the screen off. The operating performance ratio, it's notionally it's a measure of how well did you control your budget. Did you spend more money than you generated, or did you spend less? And it doesn't always do this, but in Oberon's case, it actually reasonably approximates your operating result before capital too, because you know, you can see that this year was the first year. If I go back a few slides. Not too far. Sorry, operating result before capital. Yeah, you can see that, you know, the bright red section was up, it went in surplus, and then dipped in 2019 and went into deficit for the first time in 2020. And it reasonably approximates your operating performance ratio, which is trended the same way. It doesn't always happen that way, because particularly with things like that revenue recognition that I was talking about, sometimes the flow of cash doesn't match the recognition of revenue. So it's not always the case that this trends, but in this case, it's sort of saying that we spent marginally more than we pulled in last year. And obviously in a one-off situation, and after several years where we've been generating more than we've been spending, that's achievable. And you've seen your cash and investments position. It suggests that you can fund that at least for that year and possibly further years. But obviously, if that were to continue for several years, then that starts to become concerning, because we're spending more than we're making, and you have to live within your means. The last ratio I look at is the own source operating revenue ratio, and it's trying to report how well council is generating money that it can control. So if you're heavily dependent on grant funding, your own source income would be very low. If you have lots of entrepreneurial activities, if you're doing land development, if you're doing things like RMS roadworks, then you tend to have a high own source operating revenue ratio. Oberon's is actually quite good. It's coming in at 63%. The benchmark there is 60%, and a lot of councils in rural areas don't achieve the benchmark. The easy thing to say when that happens is that, well, look, it's much better to spend someone else's money than our ratepayers. So the longer we're spending other people's money, the better we are. But it tends to also mean that the overall pool of money you've got to spend is smaller. So by achieving that, it suggests that council is effectively generating its own income, as well as getting some grants and contributions. If we see an improvement in that grants and contributions position, it wouldn't be surprising to see that ratio dip. But at that point, I guess if we're maintaining that baseline of what council is generating, and then we're getting that on top, we can live with that dip. That's just the details of what the numerator and denominator of that are. As Finally, in terms of the audit opinion that gets issued, there's actually multiple opinions because apart from the consolidated accounts of the council, there's special purpose statements on the individual activities and other aspects as well. One of which is what's known as the conduct of audit report, where it sort of provides a bit more commentary. Those reports were issued though without any qualification, which means that the financial statements we were satisfied that they present a true and fair view of the operating results and the financial position of council. It was a push. We were a bit tight on the deadline. I mean, the pandemic certainly impacted things. The valuation fell behind a bit, particularly when the interstate valuers couldn't come into New South Wales to do some of their work. So it was down to the wire, but all of the reporting and disclosure requirements were met. As we do the audit and we're dealing with things like your processes for making payments and receiving money and that sort of thing, we'll raise items with management, sometimes just in conversation, sometimes more formally through management letters. That's happened during the year, and those management letters typically go to the Audit Risk Committee, and that's been acted upon in the fashion that you would expect. And so I think now there's a good opportunity to acknowledge Lynette in the other room and the finance team for having got that over the line in a tough year with a lot going on. Having covered that, though, if there's questions either on the audit or on the financial statements, I'd look to take those.
Thank you, David. Any questions, councillors? Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. John, just so if I can, if we go to the unrestricted current ratio, I'm assuming that is internally restricted and unrestricted for the basis of getting to that ratio, is it? They add both together.
So it takes out the external restrictions.
Exactly, but it includes the internally restricted and the unrestricted.
Yes,
And that's
yes, it does. Yes,
okay.
and the corresponding liabilities.
That's right. So you said in the accounting standard in the future, it may not be a requirement of council to include internally restricted. Obviously, that may be of benefit to councillors because we obviously want to ensure that we have a pool of money that deals with all things from employee liabilities and all the other things.
Internally restricted will continue to be reported.
Okay.
The unrestricted may not be split out in the financial statements.
Right.
So it would simply be a line item other in the internal restrictions.
Okay.
So that's the current proposal.
Right. Okay. So it would still list the categories of unrestricted, of the internally restricted.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Noting our debt servicing ratio, I think is 5.87, say 6%. If council was to add, let's say, a borrowing of 7.5 million, I'm not saying yay or no, or what's that? How would that affect our debt servicing ratio?
So,
I know you'd have to do a bit of a calculation.
I would. I said I couldn't give you that one off the top of my head. It would reduce that debt service cover ratio. I suppose if.
And what's the cover ratio? 2% standard?
Yes, it is. The debt service cover ratio with the 3.4 million borrowing dropped from 12.3 down to 9, so that dropped it by about 3%. So if it goes 7, if you said that dropped it by 6%, that would take you to 0.
Right.
Ballpark. Very, very, very rough.
Okay. So that would take us under what is basically the OLG.
It would have you in a situation where most of that unrestricted cash is put to debt servicing.
Right. Obviously, Oberon's a small council. We have gone into a deficit for the last year, albeit a relatively small one. Noting that employee expenses increased by about 500,000 from the previous year, 2019. In current expenses, are you happy that if with rates staying reasonably stable, apart from minimal increases due to CPI, which is probably going to be minimal for the next few years, and costs and charges remaining relatively stable, that we'll be able to sort of cover our expenses adequately.
I pulled up in the financial statements, note 5A, it provides a further breakdown of salary and wages.
Yes.
So the actual salary and wages expense last year was 5.6 million, 5.69, and the previous year was 5.53.
Right.
So that although the bottom line increase, it went from 5.9 to 6.4, the wages component moved by a little over 100,000.
So does that mean more people took annual leave, long service leave? I'm assuming the workers' comp premium may have gone up slightly.
It comes back to that split between maintenance work and
Oh,
capital work.
maintenance and capital, right.
Because the capitalised wages were lower this year than in the previous year. So the actual wages figure reported was higher, even though the actual salary and wages amount only varied by about 100,000.
Right.
The bigger movements in there were things like your workers' compensation premium, which increased by 60-odd thousand. And a little bit more in employee leave costs,
Right.
and sometimes that's through people hitting anniversaries and long service leave crystallised and that sort of thing.
So we don't obviously know the ultimate position in relation to capital grants, etc. this year, and how much of employee costs will be amortised into that side of the capital works. But we wouldn't want our employee costs to increase to that magnitude again, I would assume.
Well, I think in relation to how much is capitalised,
It depends on how.
that probably doesn't matter so much, because I mean the budget that we adopt is more on a cash basis. So whether we're constructing assets or whether we're doing maintenance, we're still paying
Right.
wages out of the same amount of cash. And so if we're doing capital work, our wages figure in the accounts will look lower and our operating result will look better. But from a cash perspective, we haven't saved any money by doing maintenance work. It's it's all coming out of the same pot. So that's where I'd say that these are for external financial reporting.
Yes.
Your budget and quarterly budget review is where you want to drill in on your expenditure of wages against both your operating and capital budget.
Yeah, I'm just saying that we really need a big program on the maintenance budget because of the storm damage we've had to our roads, and we're losing value in our roads. They're getting washed about. So maintenance budget is going to impact higher on figures showing there than capital.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, in terms of your external financial report, that's where having some perspective on that is helpful, because if you know that we've been doing a lot of maintenance because we've had storms, it makes sense then that your wages are less going to capital, and that impacts on your result. But if you're looking at it cold, you're just thinking, oh, your wages are going through the roof.
Any other questions, councillors? If not, thank you very much. Very clear and concise report. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Madam Mayor, and thanks for having me in the chamber. It's good to be good to be back.
Thank you very much. Councillors, we'll go back to the business paper, page 6, item 7, questions from the public. Due to the COVID-19, in accordance with newly legislated state government requirements, the February 2021 Ordinary Council meeting is closed to members of the public and will be available for viewing via Zoom facilities. The General Manager has requested that all questions from the public be submitted in writing prior to 1 p.m. on Tuesday, the 16th of February 2021. Members of the public who submit a question to Council are permitted to do so, provided the following guidelines are adhered to. The person lodging the question must advise of their name and in what capacity they are acting. If the person lodging the question is acting as another person or organisation's agent, they must advise Council if they have their prior consent or authority. Questions from the public is not an opportunity for debate with elected representatives or staff. It's an opportunity for the community to ask a question in relation to an issue or put a point of view relating to an issue that may be causing interest or concern. Due to time constraints, a time frame of 3 minutes per speaker is allocated. The General Manager will read out any questions submitted at this point in time. Questions will be taken on notice if not able to be answered this evening, and a response provided within a reasonable time frame. I'll ask the General Manager for questions from the public, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At this point in the proceedings, there have been 3 questions from the public, and I will read them out one at a time. The first one is from Jennifer Capel, who acts as the president of Oberon U3A. I would like to ask when council is going to deliver on its commitment to provide the community with an area where fitness classes can be held. The fitness centre offers a wonderful facility for those who wish to use machines to aid their fitness regime. However, the facility does not have any space for fitness classes to be conducted, despite many assurances from council that there would have prior to its construction. It has been suggested that the space behind the fitness centre will in time be developed for fitness classes. Is council giving a high priority to this project? Is council aware there are 4 U3A classes alone seeking a suitable venue for its balance and bones and Pilates classes, as well at least 4 other groups in Oberon which run fitness and yoga classes? The U3A classes alone comprise of a minimum of 20 participants. The space for fitness classes is urgently needed. Council assured us that the needs of this section of the community would be met. Is council now going to allocate funds to see this project completed as promised?
Thank you. Are you going to take that on notice, gentlemen, and respond to?
Happy to take that question on notice, Madam Mayor, but I will refer to item 1406 where this section of the has been adequately looked at in terms of grant funding for a project moving forward.
Thank you.
The second question, Madam Mayor, is from Hardy Dryham. Council reported regular routine maintenance having been done on all pumps in the WTP in June, July and August. An 11-year-old pump failed in August in spite of council's best efforts not detecting its imminent failure, and one of the root causes was announced by council at its August meeting. A pump that dosed the potassium penangamate into the raw water to control manganese began to overdose the system, causing turbidity issues in treated and town water. This pump was bypassed as an emergency measure using a different dosing pump. Deputy Kellum announced prematurely on the 17th of November that council would provide a 4% rebate allegedly agreed in closed session in item 1601, which was never made public in the minutes as required by the Code of Meeting Practice. This decision cannot be found in the video recording and certainly not in the signed off minutes. All done in accord to a memo provided by the Mayor, which residents have not seen. Motion 33-17-11-20 did not deal with the report for the 4% rebate. Given the pump failure was truly operational matter, it is more than questionable why the Mayor interfered with her email in operational matters, directing GM to reimburse claims and likely much more. This was done well before the promised report foreshadowed in October was made public. Actually, this report wasn't made public if it exists. The council has incurred legal expenses dealing with claims by residents and very likely contributed money to reimburse losses and rates incurred during the murky, dirty water issue, settled in closed session so not to attract attention. The murky, dirty water issue is still of a concern to some residents. Council's digital media watchful eyes would have noticed reports only a few days ago. Council's less than transparent mode of operation is noted, making promises then not keeping them, making decision on shaky data, having had staff report wrong facts and drawing erroneous conclusions due to the lack of research, lack of knowledge and seemingly lack of care. My attached email to the General Manager sent in December shows erroneous assumptions and statements made by council. Like my contribution in December, this February contribution does not need a response, and I'm not asking for one. It is disappointing the council obfuscating what should be discussed openly. It is very obvious that what council is doing.
3 minutes, General Manager, please. Mr. Greyhound's comments are noted.
The third question from Michael Kentaris. The Honourable Mayor and Councillors, on the 21st of December 2020, I sent an email to all councillors, including the Mayor, regarding my thoughts on fluoridation of our water supply. From this email, I'd like to ask Council the following questions. 1. Will Council inform residents in advance of the commencement of the fluoridation of our water supply? 2. Will Council inform us of what exactly is being put into our water? 3. Will Council inform us of maximum dosage and the contraindications? Thank you. We all have the right to be informed and therefore make choices. So in a meeting held with the Mayor on the 28th, further to this meeting, I would like to ask the following questions. 1. Will Council provide fluoridated water only supplied to points in town, such as the showground, common and car park, where people in our community who wish to drink fluoridated water can access it easily? 2. Will Council provide unfluoridated water supplied to points in town, such as the showground, common and car park, where people in our community who do not wish or can't drink fluoridated water can access it easy? I look forward to your response.
I'll respond. I don't mind responding to that one. Will Council inform residents in advance of the commencement of fluoridation of our water supply? The answer to that one is yes, in accordance with legislative requirements. Will Council inform us of what exactly is being put into our water? This is operational, and I will request the General Manager to take this on notice and respond. Will Council inform us of maximum dosage and the contraindications? This again is operational, and I will request the General Manager to take on notice and respond. Will Council provide fluoridated water only supplied to points in town where people in our community who wish to drink fluoridated water can access it easily? Will Council provide unfluoridated water supplied to points in town, such as the showground or common car park, where people in our community who do not wish or can't drink fluoridated water can access it easily? I did indeed meet with Mr. Kantaris in January, and I committed to requesting information from relevant staff when they returned from leave, which was yesterday. As this is an operational issue, I've requested that General Manager Gary Wallace issue a response to Mr. Kantaris. Any further questions?
That's all the questions.
Thank you. Page 6, councillors, item 8, confirmation of minutes. Ordinary Council meeting 15th of December 2020. The recommendation is that the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of December 2020 be confirmed. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Capel, and a seconder. Councillor McKellen, thank you. Any business arising? Put the recommendation, all in favour? Carried unanimously, thank you. Item 901, mayoral minute and report. The recommendation is that the report be accepted as information. Councillor McKibben, thank you. A seconder. Councillor Kellam, thank you. Any comments, Councillor McKibben?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Certainly a busy month, in particular in the relation to correspondence. I must say, in reading page 7, about halfway down at the 23rd of January, meeting with Crown participants, I suddenly thought that the operator of the casino, or former operator of the potential operator of a casino in Barangaroo, may be moving to Oberon, only to learn later when I read the Director of Corporate Services report that Crown is a network for female business people. So I was very pleased. Though I did think that maybe not being allowed to operate in Barangaroo, they may be thinking of operating in Oberon and creating a new business opportunity.
You always welcome new business, councillor.
Absolutely. If I could, Madam Mayor, the top of page 9, I was actually wondering who Martin Smith was and if he was lost in trying to locate Oberon and his location in relation to the Blue Mountains.
Mr. Smith lives in Queensland. He has a former association with Oberon, and he was having a conversation over a drink with a friend, and they were having a discussion as to whether Oberon was actually in the Blue Mountains. So he quickly sent off an email to me, and I quickly responded.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for clarifying that. Halfway down page 9, the 23rd December, Vivian Clark of Ferrano raised concern about no scan code being available at Oberon Pool and something about unfranked materials from Oberon Shire residents. I mean, I thought unfranked referred to companies paying unfranked dividends that didn't have tax related to them. What does unfranked materials mean?
This is what Mrs. Clark Ferrano put in her email, and that's exactly franked. I think she means is unstamped. That was
Unstamped or unwanted? I don't know.
Well, it didn't have a stamp on it, so she was wondering
Oh,
where it came
and-
from. She thought it might have come from council, and I assured her that it didn't.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I note about 3/4 of the way down that page 9, 6th of January, the work of Sergeant Al Johns, and I do note that I had an anaesthetist, a couple of anaesthetist friends come up from Sydney, and they're actually breathalyzed at Mount David by Sergeant Al Johns. And I think that is the first time that there has ever been a breathalyzer at Mount David, Madam Mayor. So I do think he must be doing his job. On the 7th of January, Madam Mayor, outside the meeting, I might talk to you in relation to the issue with Telstra, because I know, as commented before, there are other issues at Murriga.
Yeah.
On page 11, second item down, 29th of January, I note this matter of the Macquarie subdivision has been going on for some time. Is there any potential resolution of that?
This correspondence was forwarded containing advice on a request that Mr. and Mrs. Brunton made of council planning staff, and this was the legal advice we received back to them.
Okay, understand.
I'm sure the general manager in conversation could alert me to.
Okay, I realise it's good. Okay, I think that's all, Madam Mayor. Thank you, and
Councillor.
I commend the report for the Merrill Minute report for acceptance.
Thank you. Councillor Cullen.
Madam Mayor, I'm pleased to note that we have a new Oberon Showground Trust.
Yeah.
And I note that you had a meeting with them on the 4th of February. Can you give us perhaps a précis of that?
It was a meeting, the trust hadn't at that point in time formed their committee yet. So it was just a general meeting for us to sort of have a chat about offering our support or reinforcing the fact that council was, happy to support the committee and when they get going, and what their vision was and how we would go about having a regular meeting, just this kind of thing. So it was really a preliminary meeting for us to meet the new board and just make sure they knew that they had council's full support.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Mayor, on page 11, last item on the 29th of January, the information provided by Barry Stubbs in relation to the water usage and water restrictions. Is that information available to all councillors?
Yes, I thought he sent it to all councillors. I can certainly forward it.
Okay.
I think he did.
Has anybody else?
I think it did. I think, yeah.
No,
I'll
double
forward it,
check.
councillor.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the minute?
It's
Councillor
just
McCarthy?
with the Telstra one, if you're having problems with Telstra and you're finally trying to get onto some system that fix it, you get a recording at the end of it. If you haven't responded in 5 days, we consider this fixed. That needs taken up. It's not right, because your landline can still be down and you can't get to somebody, because half the time you're talking to someone that's not in Australia. But that part of the system that Telstra has needs to be taken away. You know what I mean? Like they
I do
say,
get what you mean,
yeah,
actually.
so they say if you haven't responded within 5 days, we deem it to fix that. It comes off the repair list.
Mm.
And it's a real problem. They just don't want to fix landlines anymore.
It's an ongoing problem, and more of our community are having issues. And I can see that Councillor McKibben's got his hand up. More and more of our community are having issues with this, and we're trying to do some advocacy where we can with this, gathering information. And Councillor McKibben.
Oh, sorry, Madam Mayor, I was just thinking that I agree with Councillor McCarthy. I wondered if we would be prudent to look at maybe having a meeting with people who are concerned about the Telstra issue, and then see if we can do a delegation to our federal member. I know that the federal government doesn't own Telstra, but they do have some sway over it. And the idea of grouping ideas and getting ideas from everyone and what the best avenue is from people who successfully got into or been able to raise issues with Telstra. I know Telstra says on the one hand that they're bringing all call centres back to Australia. I did hear that. And on the other hand, that they're reducing the technical services department in Bathurst. So there's some contradictory things there.
Well, I did have a conversation with Bathurst, and that seems not to be the case.
Okay.
But happy to take
I think
on board
that we can take that off.
pooling ideas.
Yeah.
Councillor McCarthy.
Madam Mayor, another thing is with your landline, with older people like myself, is if you haven't got power, you haven't got a phone.
I know.
And most people that I speak to want to sidestep Andrew's input. I know protocol says we've got to go through him, but we should be talking to, is it the member for Parks? What's his name?
King Keith.
No, the federal bloke.
Oh, federal.
He's the
Colton.
Colton.
No,
Colton,
Mark Colton.
he's in charge of the Telstra side of things, and he's the one we should be having a meeting with.
Note those.
Okay,
Thank you, Councillor.
okay.
Any other
Because-
comments on the mail dinner?
Just saying,
Sorry.
a small UPS in the phone would give you that service, but they own the damn phone in most cases.
It's not a problem that's particular to Oberon either. It's a
I
general
realise that.
problem,
but,
so
yeah.
we're not the only ones having issues. So maybe a combined effort might be the way to go.
And
But it is something that we are pursuing all the time.
I
As
realise that.
we get
you know,
complaints,
but
the best we can do.
you still see the federal government giving the money out for these towers, and the towers don't sit on top of the hill
Mhm.
to give the best range.
Mm.
So there's something fishy going on, you'd say.
I can tell you, councillor, that the federal government is reviewing the criteria now for allocating licenses for towers. So there is some work being done in that space.
I realise that, but it's happened. There's
Well,
something
we're
fishy
hoping
in the
it
past.
won't continue to happen.
Okay, well, that's good.
Is that it, councillors? Put the recommendation all in favour. Carried, thank you. Page 12, item 1001, notice of motion 1001, Oberon Waste Depot. Motion is that council allocate funding to tidy up the Oberon tip. That council complete the office and WC facilities at the Oberon tip, new shed within a reasonable time frame with fixed solar power to supply electricity. What does that mean? Sorry. E-post. What does that? I'm sorry, I don't know what that means. Anyway, that staff supply plans to councillors on new cell to be used next. Plans from engaged consultants. Can I have what that word actually is? So the motion is.
Sorry. My bad.
No, that's okay.
The council staff
Yep.
use FOS out there.
Okay, we'll get it, as long as we get it right in the recommendation. Mover, please, councillors. Councillor McCarthy. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gibbons. Can I just, before I come to Councillor McCarthy to speak to the motion, can I ask the General Manager to speak to plans already in place for the waste facility, especially around dot point 3? Please.
So yeah, not a problem, Madam Mayor. Currently, the tip operates under two different approvals, one being an old approval for the waste facility, and the new one being the extension that council will be moving into in the next period of time. The plans for the new facility sit part of the DA, and they can be provided to councillors any time. I'm more than happy to provide those to councillors. We are looking at options in transitioning towards closure of that primary or old landfill section in lieu of moving into that new section under the new requirements for waste. And we're also looking at like using those consultants that we've engaged to deal with how we can transition to that new facility as a part of that closure. Council has currently funding in its waste fund to, one, look towards the closure, and two, the opening of a new facility. And we are always looking at opportunities for grant funding to be able to minimise that expense on our community. With the progression of the STP, there's been a need to look for a new location to house our pound and our supporting facilities in that area, and we've started that process in moving the pound facilities out to the waste facility to, in fact, have that additional leverage when you move persons in that locality. So we currently have funding to do the things that option 1 and 2 allow for, and staff plans are currently approved as part of a DA for the transition from old to new.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Can I just ask, where's this new cell? Is it east of the railway line or west of the railway line?
It is east of the railway line, the first cell.
East of the railway line.
East of the railway line.
Okay, thank you. So where the big hole is at the moment.
Correct.
Okay. Madam Mayor, I got to the stage of taking this up. I've taken some photographs, pass them around. Things are disgrace out there. There's paper, rubbish, trees, trenches open, our toilet facilities. The people go to a toilet that's on a set of wheels. And the other day when the lady was out there supervising the tip, I thought, this isn't, it's all right, men put up with it, but we had a lady from the Parks and Garden out there filming the void of something. It's just not good enough. And like, we don't expect the dog pound part finished, but surely goodness, there should be a WC and a shower out there for them so they can go out there and freshen up when they go home. As for the tip, I don't know why it hasn't been covered over. You know, we've had Bruce McDonald, people, this position of supervising the tip's been there. Someone's been paid, but it hasn't been done. The rubbish is out there. There's old logs up the back. Surely goodness, can't we get permission from the EPA or someone to put them all in a heat and burn them or something? The logs that have been up the back have probably been there for 5 years. The tip's not run right. We get good money coming in. We have cleanaways coming in on Monday and Tuesday with a 20-metre compactor. That should be giving us something like $800 for the 2 days. We have boards coming in. And with the Morrison Low, that was a suggestion in the Morrison Low report that we use backloads, that hasn't been implemented. We should be backloading some of the rubbish or overburden from the side of the road and filling the tip and cover it over, make it look decent. But some of them trenches have been open for ages. The thing just looks a disgrace. And I thank goodness we don't go for tidy towns, but we have the money coming in that should be able to cover some of this. There shouldn't be a great dip in the thing. You have the board bin coming in, and what it should be about $600 a load. Is that, I know I'm not allowed to have that information due to the Privacy Act, but if you do the sums, there should be a lot of money in this tip fund. So I just think, you know, what's going on? Why is it so much a disgrace? We had $40,000, didn't we, come in last year for scrap metal? we suggested that we go to the living treasures, but we're told it had to be spent at the tip. You know, like, it's just, it's a mess out there. Anyway, I think we can do much better. And do we pay for the cardboard to be taken away, or is it a recyclable thing through Central?
No,
Suze,
it's a contract.
But do we pay or do we make money off it?
No, we pay.
We pay,
We do,
okay?
because that goes part of your recycling regime that then lessens the impact on your void that you have that you need to deal with.
I realise that, but I thought there was a certain business in town that actually took it away and they actually shared the profit. So, and they have compacted cardboard. They compacted into a wool bar size bins, and they have an arrangement where they actually get paid for it. I thought they took it off to Sydney and got paid for it. So, you know, maybe we've got to have a look at what's going on out the tip and, you know, anyway. But anyway, that's my notice of motion to try and get something tidied up out there. But if this is the case of the consultant that we don't know about who it is looking at doing the hub on the eastern side of the railway line, then why aren't we renting the ground out that's part of 372, which was rented out before for about $1,000 a year? Like, I understand that when Shane advertised it to be rented out, and then he was told he couldn't rent it out by yourself, it was part of our new hub, but you're saying now it's not. There's another $1,000 that we could be getting.
New
Someone-
cell.
Excuse me,
New
councillor.
cell. There's a gate out there with a number plate on it, 372. It used to be rented out to Mark Haslop. And a lot of people inquired about it when the drought was on. And Shane advertised it. And then was told it wasn't to be used because that's where the new cell was going. So I can't understand why we're not renting that ground out and keeping the fire hazard down myself.
Number of things there, Madam Mayor, that I need to look at. More than happy to take it offline and talk to councillors independently, but you can't just take money from the waste fund and put it anywhere. The waste fund is a restricted fund and you need to deal with it appropriately, which is why it can't be used in any other thing but waste unless it was resolved to do so. There is the reason why the area that's you talk about wasn't leased for the $1,000 a year was on the basis that having an operation next to the tip forms issues, and we own that and we minimise those issues by keeping that property in-house, and those issues don't then eventuate. We also have some monitoring equipment that sits as part of that, and that would have been affected by those areas. We have a number of things that we're doing and putting in place in order to facilitate better opportunities and access at the tip, and with that takes time. We acknowledge that the tip needs to see an improvement done on it, but we're trying to do that in a way that also allows for it to continue operations. We don't want people at the back of our tip where we have our workplace and we have all our heavy machinery, but there are processes that we need to put in to make sure that that occurs. We are looking at those. We have the money within the waste fund to be able to do it, and we're looking to execute those.
Councillor Gibbons.
Yeah, just through the chair, just a couple of things for my clarification on it is I thought there at one stage it might have been the engineering's responsibility of years ago, and then I thought it was planning. It might have changed to planning. I know there'd be cross responsibilities because there's machinery there. Just for a start, could you elaborate on the the overall responsibility and who has that role?
It's one of the things that we have, that there's like a dual responsibility between cleaning and tech services, because there was a crossover in manpower in how it's looked after. That continues to occur, and it's something that both the technical services director and the planning and development director are looking at to see whether there is other ways that we can do business.
Okay, just, yeah, the one other thing that is to say, the toilet issue, the plumbing's already there in the buildings, and that sort of needs tidying up and.
It was one of the comments I made to allow people to have joint or dual purposes. To have one toilet for those both purposes is advantageous, which is why we're looking to deal with that together.
So we'll get some sort of report back when you crunch all the numbers and the way it's going to run. Thank you.
Councillor McKibben.
Look, thank you, Madam Mayor. The last several times I've been out there, I have, like Councillor McCarthy, been shocked at the state of the tip, and also it's not easy to navigate around. Getting to the drum muster area is a little bit interesting to get round bins and other things to get over there. I recall that this was raised with, or was raised by the former Director of Planning, Shane Wilson. I might be wrong. It was at least a year to 18 months ago when it was originally envisaged the pound would be moved out there. And the new facility, which was to be built to accommodate both the pound, basically the staff looking after the pound and the waste services. And the last time I was going, I was a bit shocked that it hadn't been completed. And I knew that, I thought that funding had been put aside for that. And I'm just wondering what the current timeline is for completion of that building, completion of the pound moving out there, including obviously the connection of appropriate toilet and bathroom facilities, because the actual building structure, as I understand it, is now there or partly there.
Yep.
So what is the current timeline for completion? And the general manager has said that he's already looking at all of the 1, 2, 3 motions put forward by Councillor McCarthy. So in respect, let's start with, if I could, motion 2. What is the timeline for doing the office and WC facilities completion? When is that due to be complete?
I'm happy to take it on notice and provide a report back as the
Okay.
motion allows for.
Secondly, when is the pound due to be fully moved there? Second timeline item. And I don't know if we allocated fixed solar power to supply power to the facility, including FPOS, but is that accommodated within the current funding regime?
The answer to the last question is no, which is why we're looking for additional funding for that operation to occur.
So you'll
I'd rather come back with the report.
You'll come back with a report on costing of that element of it, noting that the other parts of it, and the part that's probably not dealt with in Councillor McCarthy's resolution 2 is the time frame for the removal of the pound out there to get it absolutely completed. And if I could then go, I'm sorry, I'm not doing this in order to motion 3. When is it envisaged that the new cell will be open and commence operation? If you could provide us a timeline for that as part of that timeline.
Yep.
And now if I could go to motion 1, what is envisaged for the tidy up of the Oberon tip currently to make it a more acceptable facility? Because I agree with Councillor McCarthy. I having been to other tips, I find it particularly untidy.
So
and also, sorry, and also noting the Morrison Low comment about using overburden from other areas to cover it, has that also been taken account of? So if you could comment on those 2.
a number of things to digest in that, and I would rather pull it back through a report to council which outlines that in the best possible way. However, number 1 allows for council to have a waste fund which we add to every year to deal with the very thing that we are going through at this point in time. A transition away from an old tip to a new tip, which has a number of additional requirements attached to it under licensing requirements. So our tip is at the point where the end of life for the old section is coming to a point, and it's done through elevation and height of elevation, which then is capped and rehabbed, versus what we need to go through in terms of developing cells and how they are in fact managed. More than happy to provide that back to council in a report that outlines what these things would mean.
Okay, any other comments, Councillor Capel?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in general, and that's probably been said, but I share Councillor McCarthy's frustration, and it has been raised here at times before. I mean, we've had this shed out there built for a long time now, some grass growing around it, and I really don't think that that's an acceptable situation to have, and it's certainly not acceptable to have staff working out of the facilities that they're working from now. I mean, I don't know if work health safety sort of people came along, that's just atrocious. The facility that they're expected to work out of there at the thing. Where the big truck is parked and household rubbish goes into, when that was first put there, the area was kept fairly tidy. It always looked good. The last couple of times that I've been out there, I don't go out there regularly, but the last couple of times I've been there, there's rubbish all over the place. And that's just, I don't think that's acceptable. And you can't expect people, that's customers of the place, to leave the place looking tidy when it's in the state that it is now.
Councillor Cuban?
Madam Mayor, with the movers' acquiescence, I would propose an amending motion, which would read something like similar.
You're putting an amendment?
I am
Councillor?
putting an amendment. That the general manager provide at the March council meeting a report on matters involving the Oberon Waste Depot as follows. 1, a timeline for the following. A, completion of the office and WC facilities at the Oberon tip. Semicolon B, the finalisation of the installation of the Oberon pound at the Oberon Waste Depot. C, oh sorry, a new, this would be 2, not C. A costing for the installation of solar power to supply power to the Oberon West Depot shed, a timeline and a costing for that. And 3, a timeline for the commencement of operation of the new cell at Oberon tip. Semicolon, and 4, a timeline and program for tidying up the existing operating section of the Oberon tip, which involves principally general waste, garden waste,
Sorry, which involves,
Just
which
the whole
involves,
thing.
General waste,
right,
comma, green waste,
yeah.
and other non-recyclable waste.
Can I?
Yep.
Just before councillor Kidden goes off, like, what does council's options around tidying up things on mean?
All right, we'll change tidying up.
The tidying up of existing operating sections of the.
Yeah, I realised.
We do that on a through a process now. The workable area has a number of issues attached to it, and I'm more than happy to provide that in a report to council in March about what they are, and they aren't just one-sided. The other things it's very difficult to get an understanding on what you mean by tidying up green waste when ultimately it's a big area of.
All right, we'll leave the green waste. I can remove the green waste, but my issue is I've been to other tips and we don't have, the photographs circulated by Councillor McCarthy, and I've said it myself. There's things blowing around. It's not all contained properly. And I know that the tip has its own challenges because of its topography and other factors. But I think we have to do something to improve the appearance and to ensure that we don't have waste blowing all around, and its appearance is improved for people attending. And it obviously protects surrounding areas from environmental pollution.
Councillors, I need a seconder for this amendment. No seconder.
Yes, it is.
Councillor Capel. Okay, you finish speaking, Councillor?
I have, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Capel, do you wish to speak to the amendment?
I realise that it's fairly detailed motion, but I think it's along the lines that we need to have something a bit better done out at the waste depot than what we've had lately.
Councillor Killam.
Madam Mayor, I'm quite happy with that amendment, except for the last part 4, and I suspect that we should have a schedule for making the Oberon waste depot a more orderly operation.
I think it's orderly, but I think
It's a bit more than orderly, but I think that what we've got there is.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, I'm happy for a change of words. If someone can suggest better words than tidying up, I did suggest to prevent environmental pollution of surrounding areas, or to ensure that waste is properly covered. Those sorts of concepts.
I think that's drilling too far down into detail. I think you need something a bit more generic.
Can I make a couple of suggestions? The first is, you want a timeline for the following. Do you want to include them, because 3 and 4 talk about, well, they all talk about timelines.
Yeah.
Rather than 4 separate motions, it could be an A, B, C, D, or E.
Yes.
The second thing is that a timeline on the program for tidying up of existing operations mean I'm happy to work with that, given that I know what you're trying to achieve, and what I provide you can then debate or talk about on the basis of what I provide to you. And the final one is that the costing and timelines, if council's looking at their business paper, they'll know that council are looking to lodge grant applications to do that. So that makes it very difficult for the March meeting to provide that timeline on costings for the installation of such things when you're looking to secure grant funding to do so.
Which is this for? Sorry.
That would be a costing and timeline on the installation of solar power to the supply the waste depot shed. Now, more than happy to provide councillors with an understanding on what that means. More than happy to supply councils with information on the things that you've asked for. However, this will need to be done in a way that council is also aware of the costs associated with doing that. So what I'd also like to do in that timeline is to exacerbate, or certainly indicate what the costs are to move this beyond what we were otherwise moving towards.
Councillor McKibben.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, but just respond, gentlemen. I thought all but the solar power was basically being considered by the general manager in any event and was in budget.
Well, what I indicated was that the waste fund gets developed,
Yes.
to do a number of things, including the purchase of weigh bridges and closing tips and opening new tips. And there is a cost associated with doing that, which gets borne by a reserve each year. As I indicated, we have a current level of funds which we are applying for on a 50-50 component to, in fact, do a number of things at that facility, but I don't want to do them twice. So a pound with a toilet and a meal room and those sort of things are being included in that application to not only require appropriate servicing for the pound and the facilities there, but also the tip, because of the same location.
Madam Mayor,
So what I can see here is you've got point A, which you have funding for. Is that correct?
Well, the completion of the office is the internals of the office. The shed has been completed at this point in time.
The
But
toilet.
I'd like to bring back a report. I'll just give you an overview on what that is.
but
Well, that's basically
whatever.
provide a report.
Correct, but
So
it's a top. Okay, I'll provide a report, councillor.
it's the word timeline that's causing the issue because of the grant funding.
It's the multiple grant funds that could be used to support the closure of a tip versus the opening of a new tip.
Which makes it difficult to provide a timeline because you don't know whether you're going to get the grant funding.
I will give an indicative timeline and
Indicative
costings
timeline.
associated with doing such a thing.
The indicative timeline is acceptable.
Yeah, and I don't mind if it says subject to funding, but
Yeah, that's fine.
and Madam Mayor, I think, as you said, I thought completion of the office and WC facilities within that, I thought that was already funded. Am I wrong?
The funding that we are searching for is to complete those things. The funding that we had was to build the shed.
Without a WC?
It was to build a shed for the pound, yes.
Without a WC?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Doesn't change the fact that I'd like to bring back a report on these things to allow you to get an understanding better than what you have now.
And could I ask for the third item, maybe? 3. Current, I suppose it's current unrestricted funds that exist within the waste fund, or whatever it's called. Are there any?
Through the mayor, that will be part of the report that
Right.
says what that is.
Fine, that's what we'll.
Okay, are we happy there with point D? The timeline and program for tidying up. I think this is where we started, but this needs to be rephrased. Councillor Kellum.
How about a program schedule for improving the operation of the waste depot? That can cover whatever you choose to do that, because that's the actual outcome you want.
And appearance.
Operation and appearance. that's the
My
outcome.
my issue is, what is your expected appearance for the current landfill?
Wallflowers.
Madam Mayor, that is a part of the tip that's completed, and look at the rubbish out there. We don't expect that. And I personally expect that it should be an area that we can run a bit of grass over, and that's the way it's retained.
Okay, councillors.
Through the chair, your consent indicates your rehabilitation program that you need to undertake as part of a landfill closure, and it's not that. There is a lot more to it than just that.
And that will come back in the report.
I'm happy to provide the requirements outlined in the transition
So
consent.
Councillor McKibben and Councillor Capel, are you happy with what that looks like, that amendment?
Well, I don't think it's necessary to have 0.4, but if the mover wants to leave it there, I'll second it.
I think it's at about $30,000.
Okay, councillors, I'm going to put that amendment.
I think Councillor Gibbons.
I'm happy with that, but I just want to ask the question, the tip fees, are they covering expenses or is tips run at a loss? I mean, are we charging to live? You go to other places and you get 3 times the charges. Isn't it supposed to try and sort of a profit and loss thing? I'm just wondering where it sits with revenue and the cost to run it.
Through the chair, the cost to run the landfill is not cheap. However, I think it's cost recovery.
Full cost recovery.
Right.
Okay, councillors.
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to support what Kerry said there, that we look into the fees. Are we charging appropriate rates for the size of the machinery that's turning up with this rubbish on? In other words,
I think there'll be an opportunity for that when we discuss fees and charges as part of the operational.
no, I don't want the price to go up. All I want to know is I tried to get in touch with the director yesterday, but some of them bins that are coming there come on Monday and Tuesday, and I believe that they're coming with rubbish that doesn't belong to Oberon, but because of our fees. But we take the maybe $400 for that bin. Is that appropriate? Or would it be better that we say, you come and just pick up the Oberon rubbish? If you get what I mean? Because I've spotted there's a bin called Rural Bin Service. It's coming from over Lagoon Way, over toward Apsley Downs. But it doesn't go to Bathurst with its waste, it comes here. We're providing a service for the Oberon people. And my reason for starting all this is it's been over 2 years, I think, since this other cell was to be stopped. And this ground that was taken up, this block of land, like I said, 372, that are conflicts with whatever. What about the landholder to the north? It's farming. What, are we conflicting there too, or whatever? I can't see why this land can't be rented out and cut the bushfire danger back and we get some money. There might be monitoring posts in there, but aren't they on a post similar to the noise monitoring and if we're monitoring rainwater? Do you get what I mean? Like, look, we are not running this right, and I don't accept what the manager has said, because this has been, where's the report? This has been going on for 2 years. And the other day, well, it must have been, because the land hasn't been released for nearly 2 years, has it? Back for lease, when we knocked it on the head that we weren't, that was nearly 2 years ago. And Shane said, when I checked with him, why it wasn't being leased, because we've got consultants in. So we've had consultants go on this for 2 years, have we?
Through the chair, we have consultants on our tip all the time because of
Okay,
the requirements of our license under the EPA requirements.
that's to finalise the new cell.
No, that's for the ongoing operations of your current cell.
Okay. And what I can't understand is also with the design from the consultant or whatever, there's a conflict with the new fence that went up. That I understand there's a new fence went up to separate different things that the council staff can, what's name? Was that a part of the consultant's recommendation or not?
Council's laydown area has been established there for now over 5 years.
Yeah.
As a result of product that used to be stored at the industrial end.
Okay. But there's a new fence that went up that was built by a contractor that from Lithgow, Shire. Well, we
have
don't use
secu-
locals anymore apparently, but anyway,
Oh, that, well, I won't go there. The laydown area is now secure, so
okay,
you can't access
all
the
right.
tip through the laydown area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, one more, councillor Piven, then I'm going to put this recommendation.
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to add in this, if, add to the report 5 and a comment or a report on the required buffer zone required around the tip and the necessity why we can't develop.
I don't think, councillor, that needs to be in the motion. I think if the general manager is going to bring back a report, that will be in it.
But the other thing I would like to do is what we haven't done and we don't do when we do our fees and charges is actually, and I'm only talking in relation to the tip, what we do need to do, and I've heard similar things to what Councillor McCarthy was saying, in that we need to ensure that the fees we're charging are of a nature that they're similar to other tips and we're not lower so that people are coming.
And this comes
So-
back to the operational plan that we will be discussing fees and charges quite soon.
Absolutely, but what we do not get when we look at the fees and charges is what councils surrounding us, Lithgow, Bathurst, etc., are charging for the same rubbish to be deposited. I think we need to look at that, because if we don't, then what we may be finding is that people are coming to Oberon.
Understand, but
So if
councillors
that-
can do their own due diligence around that by finding that information themselves, or I'm sure the general manager would take that on board.
If you could take that on board, gentlemen, I do think we need to look at that, because whether it's done before we do look at the operational charges and fees section, or whether we do it as part of this report, I think it's a necessary exercise, especially in relation to tip. I'm not necessarily talking about other things.
I'm more than happy to bring back an
It's-
analysis on it, but want to do it in report form, not speaking out of school.
I'm not asking the general manager to do it speaking out of home. I'm
Okay,
talking about a
councillors, I'm
report.
going to put this amendment as in 4 parts, as it is there. All in favour of the amendment? Amendment's carried, it becomes a motion. All in favour of the motion? Thank you, councillors, that's carried. Page 13, councillors, item 10.02, costing community hub. I will note that the author of this motion is councillor McKibben, not councillor McCarthy. The motion is there that council staff provide advice on the following aspects of the design option 1A for the community hub. A, the cost of fit out not currently allowed for in the Weber costing, including but not limited to library shelving and racking, loose furniture for library, meeting rooms, auditorium seating, and for the atrium area, technology hub area, and any other areas requiring loose furniture. Point 3, any additional built-in furniture such as library or reception desks. B, the cost of operating the hub on a yearly basis, including but not limited to staff costs, utility costs, water, electricity, gas, including that used for air conditioning and heating, cleaning costs, maintenance cost, window cleaning costs, and garden maintenance. A comparison should be made of these costs against the current costs for library and the Robert Hoover Community Centre on a yearly basis. A mover, please. Councillor McKibben, and a second. Councillor Keller, thank you. You speak to the motion, Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the motion is fairly self-explanatory. I think, as I've indicated before, I think it's good process, especially with large projects, that council obviously look at what's known as through life support costs of the project into the future when looking at it, because it may not be us, it may be future councils who will obviously bear the burden of what it's going to cost to run these new facilities, which are fantastic, but we need to know what additional costs it's going to be each year. And that's what we need to know. And also we need to have an idea of increased maintenance costs. I'm not only talking about the operating costs, but if there's increased maintenance costs, and also an idea of if there are going to be major maintenance requirements in 15 to 20 years. It doesn't relate so much to probably this facility, but it might to the sewer treatment plant, or it might be the sporting facility. But in relation to this facility, we really do need utility costs could be higher. Some costs, in fact, may end up being lower, having a new building facility. It might be better insulated. There might be benefits as well as extra costs. But I just think we need to have this and do it for all our major projects. I think it's a good process. Most companies do it, and most, obviously, government usually does it. So I think for most of our major projects, we should be looking at this through life cost support, so that we know what it's going to cost to operate and maintain into the future. And as we've already got existing facilities here, what we're really talking about is there a delta cost comparison, delta cost, fairly self-explanatory.
Councillor Cullen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Total cost of ownership is a difficult process, but it's a necessary process. I would expect, in fact, that some of the costs would go down with a new building, but there will be changes, and understanding what those changes are, positive or negative, is important to our budgeting, our building the budget.
Any other comments on this one, Councillor? With the recommendation, all in favour? Thank you. Page 14, 1101. Council and delegates reports. RFS Bushfire Management Committee meeting. Recommendation is that the report item is received as information. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor McCarthy, thank you. Councillor Gibbon, thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
The reason why I included, Madam Mayor, is State Forest, I can't think of his name, David, somebody mentioned that they're going to start moving the plantations back from the roads, which does mean they're going to have less pines per hectare, I suppose. But one of the beauties of that is it's probably going to provide us with a better runoff. Anyone that's seen the pines that's been cut down on Lowe's Mount there by Tillis, you actually see the water run down the road, and to my knowledge, that hasn't run down there for 24 years. So it's actually running down there, comes under the pipe and runs down towards Froggerwell Road. And the other one was the RFS are now acknowledging the UHF radios, because their ground radios don't work all the time. And I think you start off on channel 15, and then if you're site specific, say you're working out of Bury or where we've got that problem, then you organise to go to a different channel. So, which has been a good outcome.
Councillor McKibben.
Madam Mayor, I'd commend both those points. I think they're important for Oberon, especially the reuse of the UHF radio, which was a matter of huge concern, because landholders most have UHFs in their Toyota Land Cruisers or whatever they drive, also drive on their properties, and it was the best means of being able to contact the RFS. And we've obviously had the issue about Burriga and the Mount Ryan repeater UHF tower there. And the idea that forests has advised the grad distance between plantings and roads. I'm not sure if private planters, the forestry will also follow that lead. The Borg and others will follow the lead. I'm not certain. They may do so. But I commend the motion. I think thank you to Councillor McCarthy for providing some information.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments on this one, Councillor McKibben? No, sorry, Councillor Gibbon.
Yeah, I've been doing some work on some of these fire trials, and particularly the boundary roads, and it's private pine. I don't know whether there's any rules or regulations or there's just, they're building the roads right next to the fence, and there's in some of this soil erosion country, there's gutters this deep, and the fence is right there, and there's bitty bush all along the fence, and there's nothing in the private landowner. I don't know who stipulates how far the roads have to be from the fence, and then they say it's a good idea to have the pines further away from the road. Gives you room to do some drainage or put pipes in, but I don't know whether all of this new land they're buying, whether there's some rules and regulations that could be applied to it, because there's no room to move, there's no room to repair the roads, and they're washed roads this week. just a comment anyhow, but they ought to be called in line a bit there, particularly on boundary roads.
Thank you, councillor. Any other comments, councillors? Put the recommendation all in favour. Carried, thank you. Committee reports, councillors, page 15, item 1201, CTA Audit Risk and Improvement Committee. The recommendation is that the report is received as information. Councillor Kellam, thank you. A seconder, please. Councillor McKibben. Councillor Kellam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a report for information. I'll note that the issues raised in the comment section were all dealt with quite adequately by the joint ARIC we have with LISCO, and the issues noted were well dealt with by particularly the financial staff here. And as noted in the presentation before the meeting properly began, we have unqualified audit result, which is pleasing. I will note also that the issue we had last year with proposal for a embedded chief audit officer and staff within each council appears to have been moderated substantially, and that our current arrangements with LISCO will probably, and I say probably, fit the new local government requirements, and we will probably be able to have a shared chief audit officer, which I think is probably an issue we can deal with the joint organisation. And I commend the reports.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I think the report and the attachments speak for themselves.
Thank you. Any other comments, councillor? Put the recommendation all in favour. Very thank you. Page 26, councillors, item 1202, Local Emergency Management Committee. The recommendation is that the minutes of the Local Emergency Management Committee meeting held on the 9th of November 2020 are received as information. Can I have someone to move that way, please? Councillor Gibbons, thank you. A seconder, please. Councillor Capel. Councillor Gibbons, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I'm happy with the information there. Things are working well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Capel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a report for information, and the information is all there.
Thank you. Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Gibbons.
Madam Mayor, I'm just, and I'll probably be down there next weekend, but I'm just wondering, has the Hampton Road slip now being rectified, or where is it in the work in progress?
No,
Last-
it hasn't been.
Last few
rectified.
times I've been down, it hasn't.
No,
seemed
it's
to
still a
have gone
work
for a
in
while.
progress. They're looking for a contractor, a tender to do some work on
They've issued the tender, haven't
I think they started.
they?
They've
The successful tender, okay.
it. And I believe it's not going to be a quick process. So.
It's nearly been 6
Any other
months.
comments, councillors? Put the recommendation all in favour. Carried, thank you. Page 29, 1203, Traffic Advisory Local Committee. The recommendation is there that the minutes of the Traffic Advisory Local Committee meeting held on the 12th of November 2020 are received for information. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Capel, thank you. A seconder, please. Councillor McKibben, thank you. Councillor Capel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, a lot of information there. Yes, I recommend that be received as information.
Thank you, Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the minutes attached to this report provide considerable information, so I'm happy to second the report for information.
Thank you. Any other comments, councillors? Put the recommendation all in favour. Carried, thank you. Heritage Committee meeting, page 33, item 1204. There's a recommendation there in 4 parts, councillors. I'd like to propose an alternate recommendation. I'd like to propose a change to item 4. And I would like it to read that council notes the study done by Mr. Stewart. If I can get a seconder for that alternate recommendation. Councillor McCarthy, thank you. Sorry, the council notes the study.
So you don't want on what it's in relation to, because it's on, currently says on open space.
Yes, that, I'm happy for that to go in, yeah.
Yeah, leave that in.
Yep, yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Comments on this one, councillors?
Yeah, moved and second.
Yeah, I moved it, you seconded.
Oh,
Got
okay,
an
I thought
alternate
that was only,
recommendation.
yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, do you speak on it at
No,
all?
not yet.
Okay. You on it?
All right.
Okay. Yeah, this meeting was pretty straightforward in a way until we hit the environmental issues. And I think I've burned up a bit in respect of being a landowner. I don't want to be told where I plant and how I plant trees by some people that I don't think are appropriate. Anyway, I probably should have stepped aside and let Councillor Damey took over. But I didn't. One of the things that come out of that was taking out a tree from up behind the Royal Hotel, the tourist hotel. I done some follow-up and I only got information from one person, but I understand that the tree had split into 5 and was taken away for safety reasons. Those ladies could have done the same thing. They could have checked in why it was taken away. Another thing why I don't support anything like this, and this is only my personal thing, and the thing is, the Oberon High School, when the high school was built, the trees there was significant with the landing of the plane, Kingford Smith. Next thing you know, we got a request that they wanted to cut the trees down because they're falling on the kids' heads. And the other one was the swimming pool. We kept a large ornamental pine there. It turned out to be a bloody nuisance. We had most things built, and it cost a fortune to cart it away because it was just a nuisance thing. So I think there's a lot of common sense in the town. There's trees highlighted that over here behind on that bank that, what can you do if the landowner decides to cut them down? You can't do much. But most 99% of people want these trees. The walnut tree's gone, but it had to go. It was a safety issue. So I don't support their wanting to have a tree preservation order. And the other one was the forestry plaque is out there on the Abercrombie Road for Len Walks, and in the maybe new year we'll be seeking funding for it if we can, to put a plaque up there similar to maybe a stainless steel plaque.
Yeah.
And then we let the forestry do the
Yeah.
stones around it, but I think council should put the plaque up first. And the other one was the Main Street photographs. Mr. Rawson has some photographs that have been given to him by Ray Cunningham, and it shows I think there's 3 of them, the buildings in the Main Street in 1902. We're just wondering whether we can't put them down, take some photographs of it and put them down at Cook Park on the warning down there. I don't know whether we get some funding or there's some loose money in the office or something, but yeah, surely goodness we can do something. And when people come to town, they can see what the town used to be. And
Then this is coming back through the Heritage Committee at some point.
well, that's what we're there
So
to.
it's not in the recommendation.
Yeah, oh, okay.
So will that come back through?
Well, I thought we were trying to recommend it in that part, but anyway, it's second last part. But all right, I'll just maybe later on seek council's permission, and we'll do it ourselves.
Something together.
We'll pay for it. Just get council's permission to put them up. Thank you.
Any other comments on this one, Councillor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Recommendation 2, quite a few questions. This is asking that we have the staff have preliminary discussions with the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, DPIE, regarding the listing of O'Connell Urban Conservation Area in Part A of Schedule 5 of the Oberon Local Environmental Plan. What is it currently listed as?
An area of significance, heritage significance.
So what's, if it goes into Part A of Schedule 5, what are the implications of that?
through the chair, that's what the conversation with DPI will outline, but my understanding is that they're looking to make it an item in its own right, so have that precinct protected as a heritage item,
So that will,
which could preclude certain things occurring.
so I'm assuming that recommendation 2 is both is only obtaining advice from DPI on this, and that no further action is taken until it would come back to council.
Yes, and I believe it's for development into the new LEP. I don't think it's,
If they,
I gather from conversation that it's working towards inclusion in the new LEP, not so much changing the status now.
right, because I think before we made this council consented to it going into Part A of Schedule 5, we would certainly want to know the full implications of that on future developments in that area.
Well, it does state that undertake preliminary discussions.
I'm happy if it's preliminary discussions. At the bottom of page 33, I'm assuming the SHI form, which is referenced a number of times as a state heritage form of some
Inventory, yeah.
state heritage inventory form. And that's referring to the matters at the top of page 35 and the recommendation there, which that these are purely to be put on the state, basically in the archives of the state, to be included within inventory to the O'Connell urban conservation area. I, like Councillor McCarthy, read the report at page 39 and following, and had a lot of questions in relation to this, including considerable increased costs for council if we have to look after all these areas on waterways for weeds and everything else, and also by precluding landholders from accessing stock water from some of these streams and other things. In particular, comments on page 40 and the allotments to Fish River, etc. Because I'm assuming a lot of these people have purchased or have properties on these waterways in order to obtain drinking or stock water. The other thing that concerns me is in relation to walkways and, well, a number of things, but the other thing on page 44, which is page 6 of that report, was the cycleways. We've just gone and put quite an expense, put a walkway under the corridor of Oaks. And if I'm reading the bottom of this correctly, it's now saying we should have put a cycleway as well. I realise this is a written, and a lot of it's very interesting and very good, but I certainly think it needs a large critique over it by council before any actions are taken in relation to it.
Well, the council is to note this.
Noted, I understand that, yes, and I understand the reason for noting it, it certainly would increase council's costs considerably. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Capel.
I was just going to say that, Madam Mayor, it's not for consideration, it's for noting, and so there's no need to discuss it.
Any other comments, councillors, on this one? Councillor McCarthy?
In support of Mr. Stewart in some incidents, and it was clarified by our heritage advisor, some of these walkways and these items where it runs down a stream were taken up in the 1800s, mainly in New Zealand. And he thinks it's a good idea, which is fair enough. But where you've got to actually fight back and resume it or whatever, you create all that problems, and the use of it, maintenance becomes a problem. And Ewan's words were, that's irrelevant.
It's a vision. It's a vision.
I don't get me wrong, I don't take it away from him, but yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments on this one, councillors? Put the recommendation there in 4 parts, all in favour? Carried, thank you. Page 52. Oh. 1301, councillors. Local roads and community infrastructure program extension funding allocation phase 2. There is a recommendation there, councillors, that I'm going to put to get the conversation going, but be aware there will need to be an amendment when it's decided what projects we're going to support. So do I have a mover for the recommendation that sits there? Councillor McKibben, is there a second? Councillor Kellam, thank you. Now, I think you may have all had an opportunity to look at the opportunities. And I think the easiest way to do this is we will go around the table. Each person can have their comment and put their preferences, and then we will come to a consensus. I don't think there's any other way to do it. Yes, Councillor.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I think before we get to that stage, there are some questions.
Well, when we come to you, maybe you can put your question.
Well, I think the questions might be relevant.
What are the questions, Councillor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of comments, bottom of page 42, that paragraph should refer to phase 1, not phase 2.
Yeah, we've noted that.
And just to note on 53,
Yeah,
for everyone to note that Hazel Grove Road and Ginkin Road have been completed. That's why in the addendum provided to us by the General Manager and in the recommendations on the road program, we're talking about Beaconsfield and Carlwood roads. If I could, on them under option 2, under community infrastructure projects, page 54, half to 2/3 of the way down the page. I note with several of these, they are also included within grant opportunities under 1406.
they are.
1406. We've included specifically in there the Oberon Indoor Fitness Centre and the recreation room at the Oberon Pool. And I think, can't recall if the new amenities at the Oberon Pool were also included there. I think certainly the last 2 bullet points there were.
So
And I, in order to be able to sort of make a decision, we sort of need, if we're putting grant applications in for those, is there any, do we have any view from staff as to what the likelihood of success of those applications would be? Because it could flavour our view on how we prioritise those things that will be subject to grant opportunities and are referenced later under the grants area of these reports.
I sympathise with that question, and I'll go to the General Manager.
So through the chair, the reason why those 3 projects have been put in is because they sit high and on your priority list of your community infrastructure wants. If council were not to support these as part of this money, which is not a grant, it is money that's being allocated to council, we will continue to support a grant application for these projects because they are high on your community infrastructure matrix. So it's a matter of, we've supplied these projects on the basis that they are currently on our infrastructure matrix. And if they aren't supported through the allocation of funds, we will seek grant funding for these projects. In terms of, can I give an undertaking on whether we're going to get them or not? Can't do that.
I don't think we are asked for a guarantee, Madam Mayor, but we sometimes have a view as to, you know, we've got no chance, we've got a reasonable chance, we've got a good chance. I think, and I know that's hard to
I
say.
think that's quite unfair to put that to the General Manager in a public forum.
Right.
Councillor.
Well, it does
So
flavour our view.
You have seen the grant process over
I
many
have
years
seen the grant
yourself
process.
to form an opinion.
And what I will say, Madam, through the chair, is that the way we position grants is purely based on the information that's provided in the grant funding requirements.
Criteria.
And we push those projects to where we believe we've got good opportunities to secure those grants. Whether we do or not, I can't comment.
Is there any other clarification before we go around the table that's required? Councillor Kellam, do you have any preferences here or comments?
The part that we received as a late submission, which is of course Noonan's Hill Road, and some of the other items there. In terms of roads, I would ask the, through the chair, the technical services director, how much money are we currently spending on that Noonan's Hill Road section that you're seeking to, sorry, that council put up for being sealed?
Through the chair, but the frequency of grading the entirety of the road would be probably on a basis of 4 times a year at this point. That has been occurring. More so, really depending on summer storm activity is really probably the primary causation of a lot of that damage. But total sums of money in terms of expenditure to do a road or a road grade. I don't actually have that detail at this stage, but yeah, look, certainly if the work were to be undertaken, it would significantly reduce, I suppose, the intensive labour on those particular areas that are heavily eroded, which is the focus of that particular offering to council for consideration.
And so the 1.2 kilometres, which is down from Duckenway Road and across the river, beyond that a little bit.
That's correct.
That's estimated at $312,000, correct?
That's correct.
At the moment, I'm thinking, from my perspective, on Noonan's Hill Road is a potential large side matrix. It is an important throughway for a bunch of people, and I know that section of road is diabolical. While considering the other issue I have is I think the new amenities at the Oberon pool, we reallocated that money late last year, and I think we should satisfy that particular promise we made at one point. The remaining money for that.
Thank you, councillor.
Also in the pool
Oh.
amenities.
Yeah.
No, yeah, the
balance.
new amenities, that's the $177,000.
Councillor Lyon.
Yes, I'd be going for option 2 for the new amenities at the pool. I think the recreation room needs doing up, and the extension on the indoor fitness centre.
Thank you. Councillor Hickey.
I would suggest Noonan's Hill Road,
Noonan's Hill.
and the amenities at the pool. Option 1, not the recreation room, but the new amenities.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Yeah, I'm the same as Mick, the Noonan's Hill Road and the amenities. But I'm a bit concerned about the costing of the Noonan Hill Road, but I suppose it's not the right time. But you can nearly do that in cement for that cost all the way.
Thank you, councillor. Is that it? Yeah,
No,
thank you.
that's it.
Councillor Capel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not all that familiar with Noonan's Hill Road personally. However, I have had a fair bit of feedback from people who do use it and who are familiar with it. And so, yeah, I believe that we really have to do something about that. So that's on the priority list. And like Councillor Kellam, the amenities at the pool, we took the money away from that to spend on the gym building. Yeah, I think that's a priority for us.
Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would agree with Noonan's Hill Road, but I would probably go for the Oberon Indoor Fitness Centre completion of the back semi-enclosed area. Basically because I believe the fitness centre is used year round and that really needs to be completed for exercise classes, etc.
Thank you, councillor Gibbons.
It looks as if I'll have to go a bit more detailed on this. One of number one for me would be the community hall at Black Springs. They urgently require the installation of acoustic panels to make the hall worthwhile to hold social gatherings and other functions. And I've got a map here, if I can just show it to you. It's an old map that's been around for a while, and I just think there's a big expanse of country. We have Oberon up here, and we have Black Springs here. Now, this is to do with COVID and a lot of other areas. You'll see that 80% of our council area is in this southern area. And I just think that the Black Springs Hall, if it's made fit for purpose, can be a great advantage for social events and also meetings. And I know they had fitness campaigns at Black Springs and over here at the showground and exercises. I'm not just too sure, but the way things are, there's a lot of 2,500 people live in Oberon, 2,500 live out in the bush. I just think we've got to be considering other areas of spending and allocating this money. It's not a big cost. We have got it there running. Those grants may never happen. I think this is urgent. I feel that there's going to be more need to look after our elderly people. COVID's here. It's a new way of life. Things could get worse. It's just a meeting place. It's central to the whole area. It's not a big lot of money to ask, but as the hall is now, we've got a new kitchen in it, new toilets going in it. Local association, paid for the bitumening the road out the front. Happy to put money towards the cost of the toilets. There's a bit of a blowout. I really think that we've got to be thinking of the country people there in the south. It's a big area, and we can link in with Burriga on different things. But again, the swimming pool 6 months of the year. If the money's there, I'd rather support the fitness centre and maybe the roads if the dollars are there. I don't know how the dollars can work out there, but so I just feel that this would complete the hall so that any function could be had there. The council can use it. They could have meetings. They could have different various functions there. But we've got to keep an eye on our older people. We have some plans there. We have some plans to have some Sunday evening socials and play some music or bingo or something, just to make sure the well-being of the people.
So Kerry, your first one is the Black Springs Hall, second one is the fitness centre, and the third one is, you said, the road.
I'll go with Noonan's Hill. It's
Noonan's Hill.
a bad section of road and save a lot of grading and get some more control.
I'm going to go with Noonan's Hill, and although I don't usually advocate deviating from our matrix, I do think that Noonan's Hill Road is in an atrocious state, does need some money spent on it. I'm going for the amenities at the pool. I do realise that the fitness centre does need some funding, but I do personally think that the funding stream that's being applied for through the grant, which is sport, it will stand a very good chance of getting up. So that's why I'm taking Unifield Road and the pool.
Madam Mayor,
Councillor McCarthy.
if it's consensus by council that 312,000 for the Noonan's Hill Road and 180,000 for the swimming pool, doesn't that give us 40,000 left over? That could be.
I don't know. I'll have to get the.
We might have to give preference then to the Black Springs.
That could be an option.
Yeah,
too.
be an option to the councillors.
So through the chair, Councillor McCarthy sort of stole a little bit of thunder, and every councillor.
Fix the tip and I won't.
You can steal thunder all you like, councillor. Noonan's Hill was either the first or second priority from everyone. So with that in mind, if you're going to allocate $312,000 for the Noons Road, and we will bring back an appropriate costing for councillors at the next available meeting to make sure that if it does meet that requirement, or if there's further that council want to look at, we will provide that. To Noonan's Hill Road as priority one, that will leave $220,000 left in the kitty. The next one is the pool amenities. So we have the pool amenities.
489. Sorry, 489, the total,
492.
or 492.
492.
Going like.
So that leaves how
So,
much?
No, it was 177, I
Excuse me,
thought.
councillors.
So
amenities.
six councillors have then prioritised the pool amenities as a project that they want to see. It's not unanimous, but is consensus there at 177.
That's right.
So 220.
It's 489. Councillor
Yeah,
McCarthy's using 490. Using
But
190.
it does say 180,000 for the amenities pool. Then the note is that council will recall 177 for this project was awarded, but 180 is what's been designated as to go towards that project. That's
So-
how I read that.
So there is approximately
Yeah.
$40,000 left that you may want to consider. I'm in your hands.
Can I ask if councillor Gibbons has any idea of, I mean, I note that that project is $50,000.
42, I think that one, or 44.
42?
5102.
That's not, no.
The green application
No,
that was
that's not
submitted
The
was
Tuesday board
44.
is 44, and I'm sure that the association can pick up any shortfall on that again.
Sorry, councillor Cullen.
Madam Mayor, noting that the costing for the Noonan's Hill Road is a rough order of magnitude at the moment. I think if we wait till we get a decent costing back, we've got $40,000 to leeway there. And once we have that figure, we can then come back and revisit if we need to allocate an amount of money to some other project. And that allows us to do the priority one. And if there's suitable money, I would be happy to support Councillor Gibbons' proposal, but perhaps at the next council meeting.
Can I suggest, councillor Gibbons, that we have a letter from the association committing some financial, not a figure, but some financial support towards the project.
Yep.
That way, when it does come back, we don't have to go away again. We can decide that on the night.
Through the chair, just to give support to that, if council was proposing to go down that path. The requirements of the deed is that all projects need to be submitted by June 30. However, and the kicker is that all projects need to be completed by December 30. So the reason why we want to go early is we also know that we put these applications, or we certainly put our priorities in, and it takes a number of weeks before we get a sign off from the Deputy Prime Minister or whoever signs the funding deed to say, yep, we accept this. So we're trying to go early. However, in this instance, I don't think that it would be a good, it's not a bad idea to go down this path to give Chris a better idea of scoping and costing that Noonan's Hill Road project.
Councillor McKechnie.
Yes, Madam Mayor, while we're throwing in wildcard options, I'm going to discount Councillor Gibbons' suggestion for the Blacksmiths Hall. But is it possible that we could, other councillors could raise some other projects for consideration at the next meeting if there's a
For the shortfall,
for the shortfall?
I can't see why that couldn't be, as long as they can.
I'd like to suggest the footpaths in Scotia Avenue, the existing ones, be repaired or replaced. Because that is absolutely dreadful up there. That people have to walk down the street, down uneven ground, on slopes, wet grass, banks. We have elderly people that go walking there every day for their health. Quite dangerous. And it's one of the major residential streets in town and no footpaths.
Can I suggest, Councillor McKechnie, that you put this in an email to the general manager so that it can be considered as part of the
Yep.
ongoing report?
For sure.
Okay, councillor.
Thank you.
They're all going.
Madam Mayor, I support Council McKechnie's thing about the footpath up there. But if we're looking at putting the field up there, it needs to be wider than their standard footpaths. In other words, if you're going to have your sporting complex up there, you need to have a little place like Mandurama. They have a footpath and it's great. Like it's, you can ride it. The mother can be there pushing the pram along, the little kid can be there with his push bike. What we're building at the moment, and don't get me wrong, it's up to us, but if Council McKechnie is pursuing this, we need to look at a wider footpath as well.
This can be discussed.
Yes, I
after the
know, but we've got to
Councillor
start
thinking now.
thinking.
Councillor Cagle.
Madam Mayor, far be it from me to suggest that we might spend money somewhere else other than Black Springs. Another possibility might be, if there is some money left over, to add it on to a few more metres on the Newnan Hills Road, Newnan Hills Road. I think that would perhaps be a better use of the money, use it for the things that we are trying to fix.
Okay.
So that's just another idea that I can.
Happy to bring that back
Yep.
when the report comes back. Councillor
No,
Gibbons.
just going to refer to Councillor McKechnie's on the bottom page on 54. It says that we can provide alternate direction to staff as the priorities of this fund, and then we went around the table. So we're trying to fix a problem at the hall. So that's where I sit.
Thank you. Okay, councillors. Sharon has been putting the recommendation together, the amendment together. If you'd all like to read that. Are we able to submit nominations to the program? I don't think we are. If it's a report coming back.
Yeah, so you can provide where you're going to spend your money at any point in time, and then we just need to reapply at that point in time.
So you think that submit those nominations, if we want to reapply, we have to
We would have to
ask
then,
for a,
correct.
okay.
So
Okay, I can see your hands up, councillors. I'm just trying to get my head around this. Sorry.
from what? I would suspect that that's the
Sorry.
Comes up and goes to.
be provided to the March meeting.
Yeah. And then two will have to say by the March meeting.
Would it not hold it up further to put in a deviation from the, like to submit an application based on that and then have to put in an application to divert the funds?
Through the chair, my understanding is that you can split the fund.
Right.
However, it's like anything, it's better to utilise the whole funding package and then apply for that same point in time. If the director's going to bring back an assessment as to what that is, I would probably go down the path of deferring the application until March,
I think
so as we can,
So why
we
isn't
can deal
two?
with that.
Why doesn't 3 become 2 and 2 become 3?
no problem with that.
And through the chair, if councillors have other projects that they would like to see utilised in this fashion, please provide it to us. But at this point in time, we are under the undertaking that from option 1, the 2 major priorities have been met, have been dealt with. This is just the residual of the fund.
Councillor Kellam.
Just to clarify in my mind anyway, the technical service director is going to come back with a with a much more detailed costing for Duckenwater Road. The pool complex, my recollection is that was a pretty firm costing.
There was,
So we're
comfortable with that at this point in
we're
time.
comfortable with that. So, all right. So it's just a matter of what figure comes back from the technical services director as to how much we will have or not have.
Okay, councillors. I now need someone to move that amendment, please. Councillor McKibben and Councillor Capel.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. I know, I did move it. Only thing is, I just asking a question if I could. Do we need a further point in there to say that at the March meeting, any delta in funds between the 531,914 and the detailed costings will be then allocated or can be allocated to a further project? We just don't, we seem to have left that in abeyance. I can't propose that amendment because I proposed the motion, but I'm just speaking. Someone else would have to push it.
Further, number 2, a further report outlining detailed costings of the nominated projects and alternate projects to utilise the
Okay.
remaining funding allocation.
I didn't read it correctly.
Councillors, I'm going to put this amendment. All in favour? Carried unanimously. The amendment now becomes the recommendation of the motion. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Page 59, 1302, development application 102021.4.1, new shed and demolition of existing sheds. The recommendation is that council vary part C.55 building height plane and part C.6.4 carports and garages of its current DCP 2001 associated to development application 10.2021.4.1 for construction of a shed and demolition of existing sheds at lot 19 in DP 2364 section A, being known as 25 Scotia Avenue, Oberon. That a division be called in accordance with section 375A of the Local Government Act 1993. A mover, please. Councillor McKibben, thank you. And the seconder, Councillor Capel, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd support the recommendation in 2 parts as written. I'd just ask the, I suppose, the Director of Planning, noting that the neighbour notification closed today, have there been any submissions from neighbours? Thank you. So there's been no objections from neighbours. Madam Mayor, it seems reasonable to me. It seems that there's a consolidation of 2 sheds into 1 shed. It's the back of a block. Looks absolutely reasonable to me, and I'd support the recommendation in 2 parts.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Capel.
Nothing further to add, Madam Mayor, I support.
Thank you. Comments, councillors? Councillor McCarthy.
I don't think there be anything from the neighbours because they'd be glad of the clutter that's coming off the street. It is cluttered.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, councillors? I'll put the recommendation. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. 1303, page 65, corporate credit card policy 2117 review. The recommendation is that council endorse revised corporate credit card policy 2117 as reported. Can I have a mover? Councillor McKibben, thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Kelly, thank you. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thank the Corporate Services Director for a markup, which obviously makes reading these documents a lot easier. I notice the major change is just a change in nomenclature for the Corporate Services Director, and that's the major change to it, and a reference to the external auditors auditing it annually. So I'd fully support the recommendation as it stands. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly.
The housekeeping process and group credit cards are well met.
Thank you. Any other comments on this one, councillors? Put the recommendation. All in favour? Thank you. Page 72, reports for information, monthly activity report, General Manager. The recommendation is that the report is received as information. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor McKibben and a seconder, please. Councillor Capel, thank you. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A detailed report. If I could just reference a couple of areas, the bottom of page 72. The sentence that says council received no submissions as a result of the required consultation of the management agreement. I wasn't aware that the management agreement went on public exhibition, did it?
So through the chair, the management agreement didn't go on
No.
exhibition, but council did have to exhibit the fact that it was entering into an agreement with the Y. Right? If there was a submission received, the process was much longer in terms of finalising the matter.
Okay. Well, maybe I should suggest that the wording might need to be changed a little in future. The issue on the bottom of page 73, I noticed that a refresher on traffic control swim safety work management system was held for staff. Does that mean that there was an issue with these traffic controllers that may have had some impact or contributed to this accident?
I'm happy to defer to the tech services director in this instance, but my understanding is no, that wasn't the case. But council needed to look at its training processes around the swim. But I'm happy to defer.
Yeah, through the chair, certainly looking at all angles of how the traffic control management was set up was one of the certainly criteria of looking at why the causation of the accident occurred, but no fault of signage and in terms of how the traffic control management plan was set out or conveyed for the motorists as such. But I think it's just purely just an incident that has occurred with incident. Certainly that person probably wasn't paying attention as much as they should have been.
Okay, thank you.
It's not uncommon that when an incident occurs, because it's involved with a work site, we have to go through a process.
3/4 of the way down page 77, noting a meeting with Aubrey, Oberon Sport and Recreation Facility. Have we got any update as to where we are with that? The DA has, it may be under the listing of
It is.
updates, I
It is.
think, but anything further from that meeting?
The meeting that was held that day was to push the finalisation of the DA and the requirements associated with developing that document. They've been met. Lodging.
We are lodging.
That's it. We're going.
Okay, thank you. That's good to hear. All right, that's all, Madam Mayor. I push for a recommendation of this report.
Thank you. Councillor Coker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of things from the tourism and economic development activities. I attended the annual general meeting of the Business and Tourism Association last week, as did the general manager, and I will make a report from that meeting for our next meeting. But just in discussion with people there, and I see about the summer holiday visitation, Oberon has been busy all through the period. And just speaking to some of the retailers there the other night, the retail activity is still well up on their normal activities. So places like Oberon really haven't, dare I say, benefited during the COVID period. And I don't think there would be very many businesses in town who would say that they have not benefited during that time. There are a number of other activities coming up that people probably need to be aware of and start talking about, the field to forest and there's other things that are mentioned there. The banners have gone down well in the community as well, but the market trail banners have been a great success. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Comments, councillors? Councillor McCarthy.
On the 3rd of February, you got inspections of the independent living, are we open, ready to go, or is it all barricaded off still? And when does the carports go up?
I can inform council that an interim occupation certificate will be issued for the units to allow people to move in there in the very near future. Carports are still progressing with the new director.
So you can't give us a date?
When people are going to move in,
Yeah,
the interim will be issued on this week, which makes them available when the interim is issued.
okay. And the other question is when it's completed now, do we get the compensation from the builder to when it was supposed to be completed back in November?
Through the chair, those discussions now take place in accordance with the contract.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Any other comments, councillors? With the recommendation all in favour? Carried, thank you. Page 79, councillors, 1402, monthly activity report, planning and development. Recommendation is that the report item 1402 is received as information. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor McKibben and Councillor Caper.
We're pretty good team.
Thank you.
We don't really get to
Councillor
talk
McKibben.
anyway.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Informative report. If I could just ask in relation to bottom of 79, page 79, sorry, under indoor fitness centre. I'm surprised that an occupational certificate was issued so late in the piece when obviously the facility's been occupied for some time.
Well, through the chair, I can answer that. It's just a simple process whereby interim allows you to occupy.
Oh, so it had an interim.
Yeah.
Oh, it had an interim.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't realise. Sorry, was it the final occupation certificate?
Yes.
Okay, I thought it was the initial occupation certificate. I was asking why people were occupying if we hadn't got some. Yeah. Okay, that was the only thing. And I look forward to seeing the indoor living units finalisation report at the March meeting, because we have been looking forward to it for some time. And maybe we should look, as part of that report, we should look at the gas issue and see if we have such a problem in future, how we can solve it better, solve it in a more expedited form. I realise there are a number of difficulties and we had to approach the local member to finalise it, but you know, we can't, delays in this sort cost the council money because we're not getting rent on these facilities. I think it's been pointed out by Councillor McCarthy before. So it'll be a lesson learned. Yeah.
Through the chair, potentially addition to that report may be a life cycle cost analysis to save Councillor McKibben needing to put another option against the information report. But
well, I'm happy
more than happy to provide a bit of an indicative costing moving forward.
I'm happy that this project proceeded before we had these discussions on through life support. So I was looking prospectively rather than retrospectively in that regard. Obviously, we talked about finalisation reports, but the through life support was really prospective rather than retrospective.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor
Thank you.
Nothing further.
Any other comments on this one, councillors? With the recommendation on it? All in favour? Carried, thank you. Page 85, 1403, monthly activity report, technical services. Recommendation is that the report item is received as information. Councillor Gibbons, thank you. A seconder. Councillor Gibbons.
Through the chair, just a couple of things to ask the engineer. So that Clayton's pit gravel that's been won and crushed, that'd be for use on the Burriga end road of the starting up now, is that right, Chris? For use of reshaping from Clayton's pit out on the Burriga end of the Campbell River Road where they've started, or?
Through the chair, there's been two sources of gravel obviously pushed up in pits, one being the Forestry Corporation pit at Beamer, which was purposely the pit that we targeted given the incline contributions on behalf of Forestry Corporation for this particular fixing local roads project. the testing results, look, it's an end all. We can use gravel from either pit. They've both been tested in terms of the UCS and for the actual additive or stabilisation product. So at this stage, we're going to be using the Beamering pit. There is a surplus of gravel for gravel resheeting or any other need in the general area. So that's why additional gravel exists within the Clayton's pit.
Okay, yeah. I just felt that it was a fair bit closer to the Burriga end, the Clayton spit. I wasn't too sure whether we're going to use that out on the other end or not. I don't suppose I realised that we had the natural disaster snow event down on page 85, halfway down, but that's been a good pick-up to repair that Abercrombie Road between here and Black Springs. It looks as if it's doing a good job what they've done there. And the only other thing down on page 86, the Safer Roads program. So is that 19 kilometres of reshooting then?
Through the chair, yeah, that's correct. This is part of a $1.95 million project in which we got $1.65 million to spend this financial year. And it's including improvements or safety improvements to sections of the road guardrail and also the bitumen reshooting of 19 or 20 kilometres of the actual road pavement. So that is quite a substantial project in terms of the funding allocated.
Where does it start? And where's it? Is it targeted all to go on the one sheet? Is it?
Yep. So the project area is approximately around Porter's Retreat through close to Paling Yards over a 20-kilometre area.
All right. Very good. Thanks for that.
Edit, Councillor.
Yep.
Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On page 85, the roadside vegetation works greatly appreciated on the remaining section of Mount David Road. Technical Services Director. I note the continuing problem raised on 86 with the blockage of Burriga Dam toilets. And I note there's been a meeting at the dam, which is referenced in the Mayor and General Manager's report, but we have to look at how that's looked at into the future. I know that there's been a lot of work done on Abercrombie Road as I ran late for the working party on the STP because I think I had 6 to 7 stop-go signs on the way in Campbell's River Road and then at least 5 or 6 on the Abercrombie Road. So there's certainly a lot of work being undertaken. I commend you, Technical Services Director. Going to page 87, I was going to ask a question, but I think we need some clarification. And if Councillor Lyon, you might correct me if I'm wrong. I think if we look at the other meetings, technical services activity and other meetings, was the meeting of the 2nd December, wasn't that the full Oberon Street beautification committee? Because I recall only having one meeting with Spackman, Mossop and Michaels, not 2. Is that right?
We had one with, and we did have another.
We had one with, I thought the second one was the 11th of December when we had the meeting with Spackman, Mossop and Michaels, and the first meeting I thought was the total group.
Yeah, through the chair, yeah, I think you are correct there. It shouldn't have and consultants back.
And I was the second one.
Exactly. So I think it was all of the committee for that one.
Yeah, so on the 2nd or the 12th, it was a discussion about the street tree master plan in terms of what that may look like on,
Yeah, and that was with everyone, I think.
Yes, I think that's correct.
The total committee. And then there was basically I think Councillor and I were delegated to talk to the consultants who did the orange one, which was Spackman, Moss, Michaels. And if I could just ask, have we got any, I think we asked for a couple of actions from those consultants. Have they come back to us with costings or any details, or what's arisen out of that?
Yeah, through the chair, there was an email with the minutes from those particular meetings, which I did distribute with regard to Spackman, Moss, Michaels response, which was very indicative at the time, which is out for review and comment, which that email's actually requested. So
Oh, okay.
I'm happy to re-forward it.
No, I'm sorry, I've missed it. It's my fault. I'll have a review of that. I apologise, I've missed it. Thank you, Technical Services Director.
Any other comments, councillors?
Oh, I think Councillor Lyon's name spelt incorrectly in the 11th of December 2020 meeting as well.
Councillor McCarthy.
Just a clarification, Humphreys Lane road inspection, is it finished and completed up to standard or?
Through the chair, the purpose of the meeting was to advise that further work would be undertaken early January, which I believe it has.
Okay.
My return to office this week, I will be intending to have a look at that here tomorrow or the next day, just to ensure that is all in order. I have been advised by the planning department that works you know, are now complete, so I'm just making sure from that inspection this week that it is to a satisfactory standard.
Okay, and then the subdivision can be released, can't it?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Any other comments on this one, councillors? Putting the recommendation, all in favour? Carried, thank you. Page 88, 1404, monthly activity report, corporate services. The recommendation is that the report item for 1404 is received as information. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor McKibben, and a seconder, please. Councillor Capel. Councillor McKibben and Capel, show them right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Detailed report, and it's great to see all the activities that have been done and to have some photographs of them. It actually shows, it makes more sense than just having a written report. If I could ask if there's any update on the enterprise management system to the Corporate Services Director, page 89, the top of.
Through the mayor, the committee is still organising visits to councils. We're hoping to finalise that by early March.
Finalise the visits or finalise the decision?
Well, both. We're hoping to finalise the visits by early March and the decision by the end of March.
End of March. Okay, I was very interested to read the next section on the IoT sensors, as I'm aware these can be used for a lot of things which may assist council in being able to monitor a lot of areas, and also the use of the cameras as well. And it's pleasing to see that the cameras of the Reef Reserve are giving us so much information. Will we have a plan or a project in the future as to where it's recommended that we extend these sensors for use by council once we've had this the trial?
Through the mayor, yes, the plan is to develop a plan once the trial is completed, which will involve considering costs as well.
Thank you, and costing as well. The only other thing I'd ask, and it probably doesn't come up in the report, but was raised in the auditor's comments, was in relation to debt recovery, and what actions are being taken with the current debt recovery agency or our internal debt recovery procedures to try and reduce the bad debts, which I think were about 10% down to what is at least industry standard, sorry, not industry standard, council standard of 7 to 8% or better. I realise that it may be inopportune to ask that at the moment, but if you could maybe provide a report at the next council meeting, please.
Through the mayor, I'm happy to, I will provide some information in my next monthly report, but I can advise that both staff and our external debt recovery agency have picked up the pace with regards to debt recovery, and I'll bring back a report with some information.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is it appropriate to note that in the minutes that we will be getting a report on that next meeting?
Yes, that's correct. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just interested in the revaluation. The Valuer General forgot to tell us about the charge, which was an interesting move. And it's also interested to see that the you know, a good many residents who have appealed their valuation have been successful in that. There was something else that I was, something that I was going to ask the director perhaps was that in the press over the last week or the week before, there were general news items about revaluations or the Valuer General's valuations of various councils across well, the central tablelands, Central West. It said that valuations in Oberon had decreased significantly. There's quite a few rural landholders who would be a bit startled to hear that, because somebody's can we get a bit of an idea where those decreases were?
Through the mayor, I heard that as well, and had a bit of a chuckle, because real estate prices definitely haven't gone down. But the revaluation prices that they may be talking about are the revaluation of where people have put in appeals, and the Valuer General has has reconsidered their rates, their increase, and reduced it there. So I don't think it's an overall revaluation of the area has gone down. I think they're referring to the actual reconsideration of rates of values that were put out.
Thank you.
Councillor.
Madam Mayor, just on that point, I read that article and it made a headline about a large drop in values, which is a very, very, very small proportion of properties, and most of them was basically centred in town. Certainly, as Councillor Taylor pointed out, a number of rural people had significant increases in their value, and rural residential had significant increases. So it was quite a misleading article.
If I could respond through Madam Mayor, I think it's worth noting that a lot of the properties that were reconsidered by the Valuer General were actually larger properties, rural properties, and that may actually come back to affect us in our total income at the end of this financial year.
Thank you. Any other comments here, Councillor McCarthy?
Yes, Madam Mayor, just the feedback on the hub. And one of the concerns there is the toilet for the staff that looks like it's the common toilet there. But we really need to look into it and make it that the staff have their own private facilities. My understanding that some industries, it's a requirement, but yeah, look, I honestly think we've got to look at it now, and with COVID and things like that, we've got to have amenities that are controlled, like, not just public amenities, but I think somewhere along the line we need to look at it. We're not taking anything away from the plan, but maybe one of them rooms can be allocated to it, or storeroom or something like that, but we've got to have somewhere separate.
So the hub submissions have been forwarded to, to the director, have been forwarded to Coffee and the architect. The hub submission.
Through the Mayor, Madam Mayor, no, they have been forwarded to Coffee, but their assignment is finished. With these submissions will be considered as part of the next phase when we appoint the architect to finalise the design.
Thank you. Councillor McKibben.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, if I could again, I was just going to clarify that on page 95. I was just a little unsure. So before we go to stage 2, we will consider the original plans. That's council here will consider the original plans plus these submissions before it goes to the architects, or with the architects. What's the time? What's the how's the staging affected and when do we, because obviously we as councils need to look at also the submissions and to consider those in light of the original plan. So is it envisaged this will come back to council? I'm just not quite certain of the stages.
Through the Mayor, the program for this is that the next phase is the completion of the design, and through that phase there will be opportunity for community and councillors to have further input into that.
So,
into the design plan.
so is that before it goes to the architects? Or
Can you hear that?
part of the brief?
Director?
It will, through the Mayor, will be part of the brief, Councillor McKibben, and the architects will consider that as part of their brief, as their scope, part of their scope.
Okay, I just, I think some of these things, I just want to ensure that some of these things are looked at and considered before we brief the architects and they come back with something and we say, well, not though, as a result of the community consultation, we think certain, you know, there may be certain changes before we don't want to be paying them fees to do something that we don't think is quite what we want now after the community consultation is what I'm saying. I mean, I think there's been some good input from the submissions that we need to take into account is what I'm saying.
That's great.
Yeah, and we don't want to be paying architects to go off on it without council saying, well, we think that's an important issue, maybe that's not so important, we think that's a good issue, etc., so that we can actually properly brief the architects in advance, because the last thing we want is them to be doing nugatory work. We want to be keeping our design contingency amount to a minimum, is my view.
So through the Mayor, are you suggesting that we put back the time frame slightly to provide the councillors an opportunity to have that input?
I think, when are you intending to go to the architects with stage 2, if I could ask? What date?
We're, through the Mayor, we're hoping to finalise the expression of interest for the project management over the next week or 10 days. The aim is to go out to tender in March.
Could I suggest that it's been proposed that there be an extraordinary general meeting in relation to an issue on the STP, that it might be an appropriate time to also bring this up at the STP, if I could ask you through you, Madam Mayor, to the General Manager, if that would be appropriate, and to the Director of Corporate Services. I just think we need to ensure we have a proper brief and the considerations be looked at.
So the STP extraordinary meeting is not yet scheduled?
No.
Through the Mayor, I'm not aware of that special meeting, but I'm happy to provide information to it.
I'm through the chair, the information has been provided. It's just a matter of whether councillors think that they're a good idea or not.
That's
to
what I'm
include
saying.
in that brief. So if it's a debrief on the submissions, certainly that's something that we could consider.
So that STP meeting will need to be a whole of council meeting. Is it
Yes,
envisioned to be a whole of
it
council
does have to
meeting?
be a council.
Through the chair, an extraordinary meeting is a full meeting.
Okay.
And all I would suggest is we have a list of what's been suggested, and then we look at each of those and say, yes, we think that is a good idea and needs to be incorporated in the design brief. No, yes, no.
And that shouldn't be too difficult,
No.
because out of the 7 submissions, a lot of the information was just querying the site and querying the funding, which is already settled.
That's right.
So we're just looking at.
There was some
input into
re-emphasis
the-
on areas.
Input into the building.
Yeah, re-emphasis on areas and a few
Yeah,
other
but
things.
I
that we
can't
need-
see any problem
And I
with
think that we as a council now, with those submissions and what we had as the original, need to look at it and say, yes, we agree with the submission, or
We've done.
Through the chair, to make this quite streamlined, as part of that report, you have all the submissions.
Yeah.
yes, we do.
I suggest that through this process that the director brings back a summary of those submissions as to what's been suggested, and council can then look at them and say, in, out, not required, in, out, not required, in, out, not
That's what I was
required,
suggesting.
and go from there.
That's what I was
I don't
suggesting.
see that being a huge analysis. It's something that would help or assist not only the project manager, but
Yeah.
the director in formulating the brief.
You're spot on, Mr. General.
Okay, happy for that to happen. Any other comments, councillors, on this?
I just can't understand, you go to the project manager next, and then to the, what's saying, out to the people, and aren't you going to the architect somewhere along the line?
So through the chair, we have to put a design together.
Yep.
So we have to, in fact, seek expressions for architects to do that.
Okay,
And then the project manager will have oversight of that whole process. But in this instance, we have to prepare a brief for the architect, and this is where the conversation has got to.
okay, that's fine.
Okay, councillors, I'm going to put the recommendation on in favour. Carried, thank you. Page 124. Item 1405, statement of investments. Recommendation is there that the council receive the report. Item 1405 is information. Can I have a mover? Councillor McKechnie, thank you. A seconder, please. Councillor Kellum, thank you. Councillor McKechnie, do you wish to speak to this one?
Oh, no, it's pretty straightforward. All the information is there. It's a bit sad with the interest rate side of things. That's what life is.
Councillor Kellum,
Nothing to add.
any comments here, councillors? Recommendation, all in favour? Carried, thank you. Page 127, 1406, grants monthly update. The recommendation is there that report item 1406 is received as information. A mover, please. Councillor Capel and Councillor McKibben, thank you. Councillor Capel.
Likewise, Madam Mayor, straightforward information. I recommend the motion.
Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just if I could, page 128, C, fixing local roads, which is C, which is about a third of the way down. Yarkstone and Burriga Road restoration.
Yeah.
So Forestry Corporation is only contributing 49,536, which then means the council's contributing, there's no actual co-contribution from council, is that correct?
Through the chair, that's my understanding. Yes, we're going after the lot.
Right, and the co-contribution we're saying is from forestry, they won't up their contribution?
The co-contribution by way of gravel or by way of cash?
I would think it'd be in kind through
In kind.
gravel.
Yeah.
It's in kind gravel.
Yeah.
through the chair.
Okay, just in the table, should we be noting the, was it the CRIF grant, which was actually unsuccessful, which was the Black Springs acoustic panels? I didn't see that on the table, but maybe that's
Yes, I see it is mentioned.
in the table.
Not much in the table.
Not in the
No, it's not mentioned in the table, but normally we mention unsuccessful ones
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
in the table.
It's written as part of the report.
129, halfway down. Halfway down, I'm assuming under the Building Better Regions Fund for the STP, which is the federal government grant opportunity, which closes on the 5th of March, and is one of the reasons we're looking at an extraordinary general meeting, extraordinary council meeting for the STP. The CBA refers to cost benefit analysis in the second paragraph.
Mhm.
And so we're for the sports complex, we're applying under the Bushfire Local Economic Recovery Fund at the top of page 128. And we're also applying into the Building Better Regions Fund infrastructure team round 5. Is that correct? Have I got it right? Under
Through
both
the
of them.
chair, that is
That is
correct.
For the full amount in both?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay. I'm in the next one, Building Better Regions Fund, infrastructure scheme, round 5, other projects. wondered whether the Black Springs, if the Black Springs acoustic panels cannot be accommodated elsewhere, whether it could also be applied for under this grant. That's the first part. The second was on page 130, the third bullet point. I don't think the O'Connell Recreation Ground development cost of 200 to 300,000 comes within the town improvement fund, unless I'm wrong. It should not fall under, it should not say funded by the town improvement fund. Or part funded, it's not part funded by the TIF. So I think that's incorrect.
Through the chair, apologies if that's.
It says at the top, council applicant staff are preparing applications for projects already funded by the town, part funded by the town improvement fund, including the first two are right. The third one, O'Connell Recreation Ground development cost, is not correct. It's not funded by the
That should
TIF.
probably not be a
Apologies.
dot point, it should be a
A
separate.
separate,
line.
It should be a separate.
line.
It's a
Yeah.
separate line.
My question is, as another separate line, if we don't have sufficient funds from the, I get confused with all these grants, the amount of 531,000 to put into the Black Springs acoustic panels, it could be included in here.
Through the chair, we look at all the opportunities to look at those projects, and they are there
Yeah, okay.
to be able to be utilised as required. The intention of this report is to try and give an indication to council that there is still lots of opportunities out there to source funding.
It would be also possible that though we have already agreed under 3A and page 130, that the amenities for the pool be actually funded from that amount we have been granted, that we could have put the amenities for the pool into this fund as well, could we not, as it was part of a sporting?
Possibly, hey?
Through the chair, we could have done a lot
All
of
right.
things, which is why the one need to be read in conjunction with 1406.
I note that we were unsuccessful with the Campbell's River Road deviation project. I think the general manager indicated that there may be an opportunity for a further grant opportunity for that coming forward. Is there? Or do you know if there is a grant opportunity coming forward that could be included?
Through
I know the grants office there is looking at another funding stream for that,
correct.
Okay.
but maybe it's not to the point where it's been submitted yet or formulated.
There hasn't been an opportunity for that to be submitted at this point in time. But
Right, that's all from me. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor? Councillor Cable, any other comments, councillors? Putting the recommendation, all in favour? Thank you. Page 131, 1407, water and sewer plant report. The recommendation is that report item 1407 is received for information. And I'll just note that with the dam levels under January 2021, the bottom line should read 32.1, not 2.1. Can I have somebody to move? Move, thank you. Councillor McKibben and Councillor Gibbons, thank you. Councillor McKibben, do you wish to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for that that amendment. Otherwise, we would be in a disastrous situation without them. And coming in today, as I had a chance to stop at many occasions to view the dam, I noted it's more than 2.1%. Bottom of page 132, second bullet. Noting that the main contractor, whose name prominent is it or something, who was doing work in Queensland, has now been able to divert their attention to this project, the fluoride project.
Yep.
Do we have an updated timetable for completion and commissioning of this plant, please?
Yeah, through the chair, update on the handover date or commissioning date as a test phase from Prominent Fluids is expected to be the 27th of this month, February. It still has a way to go with regard to then further whole point checks with DPI and New South Wales Health. So following the report from Prominent will be then discussions with how we can move that forward with DPI and also the public requirement to advertise to the public in terms of council's intent to introduce fluoride inception into the water system. So it is a lengthy process. I will keep council abreast of those dates as they come to hand from DPI. But it is the intention to have this up and running as soon as we can, so we can sign off from state government.
Is it appropriate to provide a new timeline, please?
Yeah, through the chair, certainly I have some information that I'm happy to share with councillors in regard to the anticipated timeline as I know it at this stage.
At this point in time, our ending point is March.
In the March?
If there is no action from the bureaucratic level, as Chris has indicated, there'll be push from other avenues to meet those timeframes.
So there's only one other matter that needs to be addressed is with the actual training of our staff, which is currently being undertaken. So it just needs to be that process take its course and be signed off and certified as in terms of two qualified operators that can actually operate fluoridation component of the water treatment.
But initial training can take place now, and then once the commissioning, you can obviously do the final training then, so it can be done basically concurrent.
Initial training is in progress as we speak. So the formalities of it had commenced late last year. It is quite a intensive course, as you could understand, and is taking its due course through qualified engineering water engineers and taking New South Wales.
So what's the scheduled date for completion of the training?
The training at this stage, as I understand, hopefully will be complete by March. And that should sort of coincide with regard to the water inception.
Early March?
Well, that's the hope at this stage. There has been some issues with TAFE restructure and their delivery program. I think, however, that is in the process of being resolved, and that's not just as a result of Oberon staff being trained. It's statewide, so it has been something that we've been closely watching.
So in the timeline you're proposing to circulate, you'll also include the training completion.
That's correct.
Thank you. I move the report, Madam Moore, that the water and sewer plant report be accepted.
Thank you, Councillor Gibbons.
Just the only sad part is that upstream from the Fish River is not getting the rain. We've got 66 mils here in town and just up, only got 25 and 30. It just doesn't seem to be falling in the catchment area, which is hurting the dam where the floods over the other side. But yeah, we'll keep on working on something there. Good report.
Any other comments here, councillors? All in favour? No, thank you. Page 134, 1408. Monthly update, status of council resolutions. The recommendation is that report item 1408 is received as information. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Capel, and a seconder, please, councillors. Councillor McKibben. Councillor Capel, do you speak to the report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A very comprehensive report, and it makes it a lot easier for us to keep up to date with the summary progress status column. Thank you for doing that for us, and it might make it a bit quicker tonight.
Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I could just ask a few questions. 135, the first row on the Dog Rocks Road. This matter has been going on for so long. Why has the Value General suddenly said it cannot finalise the matter prior to 28th of February? Any reasons provided?
Stage that's the advice that we received. There's been no other information forthcoming in relation to why. That's just the timeline that's been provided.
Could I suggest that if this thing starts getting out of hand again in relation to time, noting the time it's been going on, that maybe it's a matter that needs raising with a local member. If I could, Madam Mayor, Page 140, that's been dealt with, the top row, we talked about that a minute ago, timeline, date of completion. Page 142, in relation to expansion of the GPS telemetrics. It's good, it's pleasing to see we've got GPS Iridium on the ground, on the greater fleet. What's been budgeted and what is the timeline for this GPS Iridium to be expanded to the other vehicles in the fleet?
Through the chair, at this stage, it's something that is taking its course through the budgetary process, which then will be put in the budget for council consideration. I don't actually have any figures on me at this stage to be able to provide, but certainly can provide that further information to council.
So has it, I can't recall whether it's been allowed for in our budget for this year, or we're looking at it next year for vehicles outside the greater fleet and what's already been a heavy vehicle.
So just through the chair, item 3 is the capital purchase of additional GPS telemetry will be considered as part of the 20.
Okay, fine. That's all other vehicles. Yeah. Okay, fine. Thank you. Sorry, page 144. Look, it's just well, I don't know, it's additional wording in the nomenclature. I just think this 18,900, it's to undertake the electrical design for undergrounding the electricity in Oberon Street from Raleigh to Dudley Street. There's nothing that talks about underground power there. And I think it should reference that. That's what we're actually doing. Sorry?
It's a resolution of council. That is the
Oh, okay.
resolution.
But
Just
there's nothing
in
about
that-
underground power.
in that, the mayor and myself met with members of the Central Energy, and to their benefit, they've recognised that they have been a bit absent, and they've got a new mantra about trying to work with councils to try and deliver on a few things. And I took that opportunity to raise quite a number of things with them about what concerns us about those processes, and they were quite receptive to those things. So it's progressing, and we're advocating even in that space to try and get underground power across the whole of the residential area. There's one or two completely different things, but at least they know it's on their radar.
So, Madam Mayor, I understand there's an issue with putting it in the resolution. Could I suggest that in the comment, maybe it says electrical design for undergrounding the power currently in progress? And that doesn't change the resolution. The other
Through
comment,
the chair, the design that we've asked for is underground power.
anyone reading this outside that wouldn't know what we were doing with the power there. That's my only question. And again, you know, if we're talking about, and I can't recall, but if we're talking about, my recollection, Scotia Avenue doesn't include underground power. If we were to do the footpath, it's a good idea to look at undergrounding power then, if Essential Energy are going to come to the party with something, but that's probably too costly. But these things have got to be considered.
What I indicated, councillor, was that we made them aware of our issues. I made no mention of the fact that they were going to pay for anything.
Okay.
Nor did they.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's all I have to report. Thank you. And my recommending or second.
Any other issues here, councillors?
Just clarification, the blokes from Essential Energy, where were they from?
They were actually based in Port Macquarie.
Okay, so we went to the top, okay. And a name?
I can provide that to you.
Okay.
Got it up.
Just that I want to write to someone and
Actually,
get clarification.
it might be.
Through the chair, Jeff Burgess was the guy that I talked to about certain things, but his boss was also part of that, who was in Port Macquarie.
Okay. Now, I just want to write on my own behalf, I don't want council to do it, is, as you know, there's 3 poles put up there in Crete Street and a laid up service, and it hits to nobody. No one seems to know who paid for it. I think one of the local inquired and they said it's for a subdivision. Council doesn't know about a subdivision, so it's very odd that Essential Energy's paid that money out maybe it's a mistake. And those 3 poles could come down.
Maybe they do more than we do.
They do, probably.
I'll supply those contact details.
Thank you.
There's a sports area clause.
Hey,
Any other comments?
It's got an underground zone.
councillors? No other comments? I'll put in the recommendation. All in favour? Carried, thank you. 150, item 1409, quarterly budget review statements, October to December 2020. The recommendation is there that the report item is received as information. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Kellam, thank you. Councillor McKibben. Councillor Kellam.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a report for information. I note that operating performance, actual and budgeted are back into healthy territory after 2019-20. Own source operating revenue is again back into healthy, or actually is in healthy territory, as is the budget. So the ratios are doing well, which indicates that our budgeting and forecasting is doing well.
Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, detailed report. I just have a few questions if I could. On page 153, halfway down, in the restricted cash and investment reserves. Oh, actually, it's the internal restrictions. There's an amount of 15,000 against the Burriga Village improvement, 11,000 for Black Springs and O'Connell improvements. Is that meaning that the amounts we allocate each year for these villages are not being spent? I thought some of them were being spent. I'm just surprised they're so large.
Those amounts have been allocated. They haven't been used.
So that's 3
So-
years worth.
I've asked the director is going to supply a report because I was most interested in the Burriga one.
Yeah.
But
I think all 3 of them could be reported.
all 3 is coming back on a report.
Okay.
But as far as I'm aware, I have been told that they are on allocated projects. Otherwise, they wouldn't be internal restrictions.
I would assume at least some of these have been spent. I was a bit shocked that they were so high.
Well,
Like
that will come
Yeah.
back with the report.
Further down the bottom, 6 lines from the bottom, it talks about rail crossing update, 38,000. Just wondering what that is.
I asked the same question and I.
Through the
General manager
chair,
will tell you.
council has a number of railway crossings that meet road interface. And we
Keep an amount of
put
money.
our reserve allocated to that should we have to put lights and whistles across Mothers Reach or those types of things. It's a small allocation, as you can attest, for possibly the reasons that I.
Do we need to preserve that restricted amount?
Through the chair, I would suspect if you ask that question of the technical service director, he'd probably say you might need to provide more in the future.
Through the chair, it's really subject to OTHR and what happens with regard to their OSRA approvals regarding rolling stock, but it's a reserve for the existing rail crossings across many locations to do any maintenance or required work to ensure safety. So that's my understanding in terms of the reserve being put aside just for that particular purpose.
Okay, Madam Mayor, if I could, the residential dwellings amount, is that something to do with our living units or what's that to do with? A reserve for maintenance?
Through the chair, it's our independent living units
Right.
component, and I'm getting a nod from my director in a way off location, so independent living units.
And the next one, restriction, what's that? 328,000.
They are some internal restricted funds for projects that are being undertaken in the works area.
So that will currently, is that all intended to be spent this year?
Depending on how much they work we can get through. I can't guarantee that.
That is the intent or the ambition, yes.
And I know I should know probably, but what's the next one? FAGs, 50% prepayment.
So through the mayor, we received the FAGs the payments before the financial year, and this is just a restriction, and over the financial year it's spread out.
Financial assistance grants.
Okay, so then we go to independent living units. We have 546,000, yet we've already, I thought, dealt with that under residential dwellings under 100,000. So combined, we have 646,000 for our independent living units, do we? Why do we have two categories?
So through the mayor, the independent living units 546 was created as part of the new development, and they will be combined at a point in time when that project is completed.
And if that's the case, how much of that is likely to be spent and how much is likely to remain?
I believe in the independent living units, 546, I believe that a large portion of that, probably about, I'm not prepared to say how much, but there is some maintenance in there for the units. It's not all the grant or the funding project for the development. I'm happy to bring back more details.
Across the whole range of our units, not just the Curtis Street units?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. On page 154, I can, these are consolidated accounts on materials and contracts. Are we saying that we have budgeted 2,345,000 and that we've actually spent by December 2022, 2,250,769 of that?
Through the mayor, that is correct. That includes that figure will adjust as we move through with the grants projects and the other projects that we're doing. It is purely a timing issue at this point in time.
So we still think that the budgeted and revised budget of 2.345092 is correct?
That is correct, yes, we do.
So if I was a little confused at the top of page 155 under the water fund, where interest and investment revenue was budgeted at $9,376. And I know it's not a big sum. And we have and the revised budget's the same, but we have an actual December figure, which is negative 1,537.
And once again, this is a timing thing. The investments are allocated across the different funds at the end of financial year. It's not something we do on a month-to-month basis.
Okay. And on page 156, and I know this is an income expenses budget review statement, but unless I'm wrong, we always at the end of the day seem to have a surplus in leadership and engagement at the end of this, and everything else is normally in the red when we come to the netting out at the end. And I must admit, I never quite understand all these categories. But this seems to be what happens every year, that we're in surplus and leadership engagement, yet we're always in the red for the others. Is this normal practice and procedure?
It is a normal practice, and I hesitated in putting this page statement strategic plan in there because it is a timing issue, and a lot of these figures are adjusted at the end of financial year.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to seeing it at the end of the financial year.
Okay.
Probably see it at the end of March. It'll probably be more interesting. Madam Mayor, I'm happy. I think I'm seconding this quarterly budget review. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any other comments here, councillors? With the recommendation, all in favour?
I'm voting.
Thank you, carried. 157, councillors, 1410, legal and consultancy fees. The recommendation is that report is received as information and move it, please. Councillor McKechnie and Councillor Kellam, thank you. Councillor McKechnie, do you wish to speak to this?
No, it's very forward. It's just a report for information.
Councillor Kellam?
Nothing to add, Madam Mayor.
Any other comments here, councillors, before I put the recommendation? All in favour? Carried, thank you. Page 158, 1411, 6 monthly delivery plan report. The recommendation is that the report is received as information. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Kellam, thank you. And can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Capel, thank you. Councillor Kellam?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Says a report for information, provides a snapshot of how we've performed over the last 6 months. Fortunately, it's mostly green or yellow, and it proves that we're doing a reasonable job, but can do better.
Everyone can always do that. Councillor Capel?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, that sums it up pretty well, I guess. And I took notice of the last paragraph in the comments there. Council asked to note the progress achieved in the first 18 months delivery program, taking into consideration some progress might be slower than anticipated due to the things that we know about. So I think overall, I think we've done well.
Thank you, councillor. Any other comments on this one, councillors? I'm putting the recommendation, all in favour. Carried, thank you. Page 174. 174, item 15. There's no urgent business this evening, councillors. Page 174, item 16, closed session and confidential reports. In accordance with the Local Government Act 1993 and the Local Government General Regulation 2005, in the opinion of the General Manager, the following business is of a kind as referred to in section 10A bracket 2 of the Act and should be dealt with in part of the meeting closed to the media and the public. I'd like to thank the members of the public for joining us in this evening's Zoom meeting. Councillor Kellam and a seconder, Councillor McKibben. All in favour? Carried, thank you. I now request that the minute secretary turn off the recording at 8:57:20. The following resolutions were made in closed session. There were no members of the public present at this time. Item 1601, that council accept and sign contracts with Artcraft, Barrier Signs, Central Signs, Denise Signs, and Highbiz Group for the supply and delivery of road signs. That council advise Central New South Wales JO of its decision to participate in regional Central New South Wales JO contracts for the supply and delivery of road signs to Central New South Wales councils. Item 1602, that council accept the tender T 2020-9 in accordance with the recommendation contained within the report. Item 1603, that council provide a donation of $230 under section 356 financial assistance to refund development application fees associated to assessment 12367567. The next ordinary meeting of council will be held on Tuesday, March 16th, 2021, commencing at 5:30 p.m. I now declare the meeting closed at 9:22. Good night.